Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was in Sword Art Online and fell for Asuna? Part 1. This story is Dream in Drive by gamer GG7267. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button, as your one like motivates me to bring more stories, and subscribe the channel if you are new so you won't miss our latest videos. Izuku walked home with his head lowered. Today hadn't been that great for the boy. Between Katsuki burning his arm and the class mocking him relentlessly the entire day, this was probably the worst day this month. I guess it can't be the worst day of the month since it's not even over yet, Izuku thought dejectedly as he walked up the stairs to his apartment. Opening the door to the apartment, he walked into the living room to greet his mother like normal. Only this time something felt off. His mother was standing there, waiting for him with a big smile on her face. It was almost as if she was excited about something. "How was your day, Izuku?" Inko asked. "It was good," Izuku lied. He didn't want to upset his mother with his own trivial problems. Especially since she seemed so happy today. "That's great, because I have a special surprise for you. I bought you something I think you'll love," Inko said, surprising Izuku. While they weren't poor, they weren't in the position to buy lots of things. Most of Izuku's collectibles and posters were bought using his own money he'd saved up. "What did you get?" Izuku asked. "Well, have you heard about that game everyone's been talking about recently? Sword Art Online, was it?" Inko questioned, unsure if she got the name of the game right. Izuku nodded. Everyone had heard about Sword Art Online. The first hyper-realistic VR MMORPG that allowed players to feel everything within the game using a specially made headset called the Nerve Gear. It was being heralded as the greatest video game of all time. The kids at school were talking about it, all of them jealous and upset that they weren't able to try it out. "Well, I managed to pull a few strings and I got you this." Inko smiled widely as she reached behind the couch and showed him a Nerve Gear box. Izuku felt his jaw drop as his mother handed him the box. It was empty, but Inko was quick to let him know why. "I picked it up while you were at school. It's charging in your room right now." Izuku stared at the box. From what he knew, only 10,000 Nerve Gears were shipped out to start off, so this must be worth a fortune. "Are you sure I deserve this?" Izuku asked, his voice cracking. "Izuku, you've been the best son a mother can ask for," Inko reassured him. "And I thought this could be a way for you to make new friends." While that was true, there was a deeper meaning behind her purchase. She'd heard that in this world, a person could be whatever they wanted to be. Her son was quirkless, so he didn't have the feeling of power everyone else did. But this game could make him feel powerful, make him feel like he belongs, and maybe boost his confidence. Izuku was speechless. He could feel the tears pool at the edges of his eyes as he desperately tried to hold them back, but failed. He rushed forward and embraced his mother in a big hug. Inko hugged him back and felt herself start to cry as well. "Thank you," he whispered. "Scratch that. This is the best day of the year," Izuku thought, unaware of what was to come. Izuku stared at his phone while the Nerve Gear charged beside him in his bedroom. He needed to set up an account for the game before he could play. Scrolling through the account info page, he filed out all the necessary information, such as name, date of birth, etc. That bit was easy. The next thing was difficult. Username. "Enter here." Izuku paused, staring at the username box deep in thought. What was he supposed to call himself? It said the username couldn't be changed later, so it would need to be something meaningful. At first he tried all_might, but that didn't work. Then he tried Mighty Boy, but that was taken as well. Izuku sighed, not sure what to do. He contemplated grabbing his old notebook and going through his old hero name ideas and hoping one of them was available. As he was about to stand up, his mind flashed to his father. A conversation the two had years ago. His dad had told him how he and his mother had different ideas of what to call Izuku. His mother wanted to call him Izuku, and Hisashi wanted to name him Mikumo. Eventually Hisashi agreed to Inko's suggestion, but not before coming up with a nickname for Izuku. His dad used it all the time before moving away for work, but the name always stayed in the back of Izuku's mind. Izuku stared at the username before deciding on what his username would be. And so, With tense fingers, Izuku typed in the box. Username: Yamikumo. Izuku set up the rest of his account. Once he was finished, he heard a ding from the nerve gear. It let him know it had finished charging. Izuku quickly filled out the rest of the information, finding it much easier than choosing the username, before applying for the account. After a few seconds, he got an email telling him his account had been created and was ready to be used. Izuku put his phone down on his bedside table before grabbing the nerve gear. Placing it on his head, Izuku laid down on his bed. He felt nervous. He'd never used technology like this before, so he was unsure on how it would work. He soon relaxed, knowing that it had to be safe. He pressed the power button and watched as the screen lit up, filling his field of vision. The username and password box stared at him. He blinked, unsure of what to do. How am I supposed to type Yamikumo in the username box? He thought. To his shock, the username box was quickly filled in with his username. Is it reading my thoughts? Izuku pondered in shock. He quickly thought of his password and it soon filled in the empty box. The white screen soon flooded with a bunch of information that went by so fast Izuku didn't even have enough time to read it. It soon vanished with a single line of text, informing him on how to join. Izuku took a steady breath to calm his nerves. For the first time since he'd been diagnosed, he was excited about something. So without any hesitation, he spoke aloud the words the system wanted to hear. Link start. June 26, 2138. When you logged into the game, what were you expecting? A man with black eyes wearing a trench coat asked. He leaned forward with a tape player resting on the table. Izuku sighed, gently rubbing the back of his hand. The phantom feeling of the IV drip still lingering. I'm not really sure. I thought it would be a game where I could be what I wanted to be without any restrictions. Somewhere where I could escape. Instead it became a cage, trapping me and 9,999 other players within it, he said, looking down towards the ground. Every little image flashing throughout his mind. His girlfriend who stuck by him and fought alongside him no matter what. His friends who supported him in any way they could. The AI girl he viewed as a daughter. His enemies who tried to take his life numerous times. The monsters who inflicted pain upon him. His mental state, which worsened the longer he spent locked in that world. Izuku shut his eyes, wanting nothing more to block everything out. But then he felt a warm and soft hand wrap around his. He opened up his eyes to see a pretty girl with hazel eyes and chestnut hair gently squeezed his hand, providing comfort to her boyfriend. Izuku took a deep breath and squeezed her hand back with a small smile. It's okay, Izuku, the girl whispered softly. Would you like to stop, Midoriya? The detective asked after pausing the tape recorder, clearly worried about the boy's mental state. He really didn't want to do this to the kid. It hadn't even been 24 hours since the boy woke up, but everyone wanted answers, and who better to ask than the two players who defeated the final boss together. I'm fine. Just needed a minute. I can keep going. Izuku looked up at the man. Truth, the detective thought, his quirk activating to the boy's claim. He nodded softly. Then if you don't mind me asking, what happened next? Izuku opened his eyes to find himself standing in the center of a rustic town. Wood and stone buildings surrounded him. It looked like he stepped straight into a fantasy town. But what amazed Izuku was how lifelike everything felt. It was so realistic that Izuku almost thought he'd been isekai'd. His eyes moved around, taking everything in. With slow and shaky feet, he took a step forward, before taking another, then another. Soon, Izuku was walking through the town. It was a strange sensation. For his body to think it was moving, when in reality he was lying down on his bed. Stopping in front of some kind of tavern, Izuku turned to face the window, catching a glimpse of his avatar. He raised his hands to touch his face, staring at the changes he had made. He didn't want to stray too far from his normal appearance, but he also didn't want to risk anyone from his school recognizing him. So he had settled for longer and curlier black hair with bangs that covered one of his eyes. He also changed his eye color to red just as an extra precaution. Watch it, someone huffed, bumping into his shoulder as they walked by. Sorry. Izuku apologized, taking a few steps backwards. Unfortunately, he bumped into someone else. Watch where you're going, noob. The bump knocked him to the ground and the person just walked away. Izuku sighed to himself. Even though this may be a game where he can do anything, he's still him. He's still defenseless. Izuku. You okay down there, noob? Izuku looked up to see a large and bulky dark-skinned man kneeled down beside him. Izuku saw a smile appear from beneath a large and bushy black beard. Unlike the previous person, this man used that weird term in more of a kind-hearted and teasing way. "And noob?" he questioned weakly, looking into the man's black eyes. The man scratched his very short hair. The sun reflected off 2 silver earrings on his left ear. "Newbie," he clarified, holding out a hand for Izuku. The younger boy graciously took the hand given to him and was hoisted up to his feet. "I take it you just booted up the game?" he asked. "Why yes. This is my first time playing a versus video game," Izuku stammered over his words. He cursed his social anxiety as he didn't want to be seen meek or timid. Not in here where no one knew him, and especially not in front of other people. Thankfully, the man didn't seem to mind his stammers. "Wow, this will be one hell of an introduction for you, then." The man held out his hand. "Name's Agile. What about you? What's your username?" Izuku quickly remembered that no one used their real names in this game, only their usernames. Taking a deep breath, Izuku reached out and grabbed the man's hand. "Why Yamikumo?" Izuku said as confidently as he could as he shook the man's hand. "Hey, nice to meet you, Yamikumo," Agile said with a smile. "I was just about to go hunt some monsters for some express. You wanna join?" he offered. "Express? And how do we hunt monsters?" Izuku questioned, unfamiliar with everything in this game. "With weapons, of course," Agile chuckled. The chuckle died down when he noticed how confused Izuku was. "You haven't picked your starting weapon yet?" Agile questioned with his eyebrow raised. The smaller of the two shook his head. A small grin grew on the man's face. "Then how about I show you how to play?" Izuku's mouth opened in shock at the weapons on display. Whoa, Agile had taken him to the starting shop in the game. Calling it a shop might have been a stretch though. It was designed for players to choose their starting weapons, or to change weapons if they disliked their first choice. Agile had seen multiple people run off at the start of the game, but he decided to look around. Soon he found a large crowd outside of a shop. After waiting, he was rewarded with a starting weapon for the game. In a normal MMORPG, you get to pick your starting weapon when creating your character. But that's not really the case here. Agile let out a small laugh and looked around the room he once stood in earlier that day. What weapon did you pick?" Izuku asked the man. Holding out both his hands, a large battle axe appeared out of nowhere in a small flash of light. Agile held the weapon with both his hands. "It's just a basic battle axe. Hopefully soon, I can get a more powerful weapon." He tilted the weapon with a small hum. "But I think I stick with using a battle axe as my main weapon." "Why that weapon?" Izuku asked. "I'm not really sure. I thought it looked cool, so I decided I would run with it," Agile admitted. The two started walking around the room. Izuku was looking at all the weapons while Agile watched him with a small smile, finding it funny how amazed the boy seemed. It was his first video game, and he definitely picked the best one to start off with. Any other game was going to seem like trash compared to Sword Art Online. "How much do you know about the game?" Izuku asked, wanting advice on which weapon he should pick. "A buddy of mine was a beta tester. He didn't tell me much about how the game worked, but he told me enough." Agile walked over and looked at the weapons lining the walls around them. "But I also learned a bit since I've been playing for. See, can you give me any tips?" Izuku asked, standing close to some of the weapons. "Please." "Sure. Just tell me what weapon you're interested in and I'll tell you what I know." Agile graciously offered Izuku his help. The young boy wandered around the room, observing all the different weapons. There had to be around 30 different types of weapons, covering both melee and ranged. Izuku stopped in front of a pack of a few knives. "What are these?" "I wouldn't recommend throwing knives as main weapons. They're strong, but break on impact, so you can only use them once. Although I think you can coat them in certain potions for various effects." "Don't quote me on that though," Agile informed him about the weapon. Izuku hummed, tucking away that knowledge for later and looked among the weapons. "What about this one?" he questioned as he looked at a large greatsword. Greatswords are pretty good. Attacks take a while to build up, but you'll do insane amounts of damage if you hit your opponent. Agile told him. A greatsword would be cool, but Izuku also wanted something that allowed him to hit enemies with both speed and power. Just like All Might. Continuing to look around, he recognized quite a few of them, mostly from watching the equipped hero, Yoroi Musha. He passed by a rapier, a mace, a pair of daggers. None of them seemed to catch his eyes. Until he came across one specific weapon. What about this? Agile turned to see Izuku standing right in front of a blade. It was a curved, single-edged blade. A katana, he said, his tone thoughtful as he tried to remember what he read about the weapon online. It's one of the best types of weapons you can get in the game. It's fast and powerful at the same time, with a wide moveset. You can't go wrong with this The man trailed off as he remembered the drawback to the weapon. Agile, what's wrong? Izuku asked, unsure why the man suddenly went silent. It's got one of the worst drawbacks among all the weapons though. Agile claimed, katanas have a sharpness limit, though it works a bit more like durability. With every hit, the blade loses some of its sharpness. It wouldn't be too bad, but when the sharpness runs low, the damage dealt gets lower and lower until you're barely making a dent in your opponent. That didn't sound right. A drawback like that would mean you would need to constantly get a new katana, Izuku muttered softly to himself. Agile, overhearing the boy, was quick to add a new bit of information that cleared things up. The weapon comes with one additional piece of equipment. A grindstone. When the katana is low on sharpness, it needs to be grinded to regain the sharpness. Although depending on the quality of grindstone, it can take a long time to sharpen it back up to its fullest potential. So if you're surrounded by enemies with a blunt katana, it's game over. That's a heavy drawback, Izuku thought to himself. For high power and speed, I can easily take out foes, but if I'm not careful I can get overwhelmed and defeated. It was a tough choice, but Izuku reasoned with himself that he could always change to another weapon later on. Reaching out, Izuku grabbed the weapon. A prompt showed up in front of him, confirming if this was the starting weapon he wanted. He clicked confirm, and a prompt showed up notifying him that he had new items in his inventory. Checking his inventory, Izuku found a starter katana, 1 basic grindstone and 5 low-tier health potions. Everything he needed to get started on his journey. Closing his inventory, he looked up at the man who had helped him. Thank you so much for everything, he bowed to the man. Agile let out a laugh. No problem. Although just having the weapon won't do you much good if you don't know how to use it, a smile grew on Agile's face as he equipped his weapon again. You want to come learn how to fight the monsters with me? This was the first time Izuku could remember someone asking him to come along with them out of genuine kindness. A warm feeling bubbled in his stomach as he had found someone who seemed to enjoy his company. So with a smile on his face, he nodded. Izuku had spent around an hour with Agile, learning different moves from the man. All of them were pretty basic. Attacking and blocking were the main things he was taught. But after a while, Agile decided to try and teach him a different skill. They made their way into an open pasture, where a single boar was wandering around, looking for a target. I want to teach you a move. It's tricky to do, but it feels so satisfying when you manage to pull it off. Do you know what a parry is? Agile quizzed him. Yeah. It's when you block a move, right? Izuku asked. Close, but that's more of a real-life definition. In a video game, a parry is used to execute a perfect block and counterattack, Agile explained. Perfect block. Agile squinted his eyes in utter confusion until he remembered this was Izuku's first game. When you block, you take reduced damage. With a perfect block you take no damage, no matter how strong the attack is. Although there will be attacks where you can't perfect block. Izuku nodded his head, understanding the concept of the move, but how did he go about executing the idea? He voiced his concerns to Agile, who sighed and rubbed the back of his head. You need to hit the enemy while blocking. It's tricky to explain and harder to pull off. Sorry, I don't know how to explain it, the man apologized. Izuku nodded and moved in front of the boar, keeping his advice in mind. It took notice of him and roared before rushing towards him. He held up his sword and got ready to strike. Sadly, the boar slammed into him, sending him flying back and hitting the ground. He hissed in pain as he held his stomach. Agile, noticing Izuku's form, called out to him. Yamikumo, do you have your pain inhibitor off? He asked. The game was able to utilize everyone's senses in incredible detail. The only issue people had with it was the pain inhibitor. You were able to customize how much pain you felt. From feeling no pain at all, to realistic pain from hits. They were off by default, resting at a 5 on the scale. The setting for realistic pain. Everyone knew to move the scale to 0 for no pain, but it seemed like Izuku didn't get the memo. Izuku didn't answer Agile, instead he stood back up and held the sword. It wobbled slightly as his hands shook, not wanting to feel that pain again. The boar rushed towards him again and Izuku swung his sword, but it wasn't the right time. His sword sliced the boar, but he was still hit again. Coughing on the ground, Agile rushed over to the boy. Yamikumo, take a break dude. It takes time and practice to parry an attack, Agile tried to warn his buddy, but Izuku held his hand up, stopping the man in his tracks. No, I can do it, Izuku claimed. A fire burned behind his eyes as he stood back up and held his katana. Taking a deep breath and closing his eyes, his hands stopped shaking and became still. Opening his eyes he narrowed them at the boar, which looked as though it was getting ready to attack again. Recalling his hero page on Yoroi Musha, he moved his body into a stance. He extended his sword forward and lowered the tip of the blade close to the ground, getting ready to counter. The boar let out a roar before dashing towards him. Izuku didn't move, he didn't even flinch. Once the boar was close enough, he twisted the blade so the boar's tusk slammed into the flat side. However, Izuku didn't account for the pushback, so he was sent spinning due to being unprepared for the knockback. Thinking quickly, Izuku used the momentum from the spin to slash his blade down onto the creature's midsection. A virtual red gash took the place of where he had cut it. The boar let out a final weak roar before exploding into tiny shimmering crystals which disappeared just as quickly as they arrived. Izuku stared in shock as he was awarded with some express and the meat and hide from the boar. Did I just do that? He thought. Agile rushed over and whistled, clearly impressed. It took me like 20 attempts to learn how to parry. You did it in just 3, Agile looked at him, clearly impressed at the boy's learning speed. You have a quirk that lets you learn quicker? He asked. That snapped Izuku out of his shock and he quickly tried to talk. My quirk is. Izuku stammered over his words. He really didn't want to risk losing the first friend he'd made. Thankfully, Agile let out a small laugh and shook his head. What am I saying? Quirks aren't transferred into this game. He gave Izuku a grin. That just means you have a very special talent. A skill like that will take you very far in a game like this. Izuku nodded, still shocked. Parrying felt amazing, but Izuku knew he shouldn't let it get to his head and try to parry everything. It'll take time to learn each enemy's attack pattern. Attempting to parry everything would only get him killed in the long run. He should save that skill for when he really needed it, or when he felt confident enough to try and pull it off. But for now, Izuku wanted to keep playing and seeing all the different enemies and note down their weaknesses and moves later. Maybe he could get a new notebook just for the game. Deciding to do just that when he logged off, he kept moving with Agile, taking down anything that tried to attack them. An orange glow was cast across the world as the sun began setting. A reminder to all players that it was getting late in the real world. Izuku sat on a rock, using the grinder to get his sword's sharpness back up to full. It took 3 hours before the sword went down to 18% sharpness, which decreased his damage dramatically. Once the sword was fully replenished, Izuku unequipped the weapon and looked around. It's still amazing to believe what I'm seeing isn't reality, he marveled at the world around him. Agile, who was resting against the rock, chuckled. Yeah, it's amazing all right. The creator's quirk must have something to do with this. I can't imagine a single person making all this without a quirk backing them up. He pulled out a water bottle from his inventory and took a sip before sighing. I think the thing I'm impressed most about is how he could utilize our senses. On that topic, why are you still playing with the pain level on 5? Izuku flinched and shrugged. It's a good way to tell how hurt I am. Plus I'd like it to be a bit more realistic. Whatever floats your boat. Agile shook his head, completely dumbfounded at his friend's decision. After spending some time admiring the sunset, Izuku hopped off the rock. I should probably get going now. I still have some homework to complete. He went to open his menu and go to the settings to log out, but he was worried he might not be able to find Agile again. Thank you so much for teaching me how to play. I really appreciate it. He bowed to the man. Agile laughed and waved his hand. It's fine, man. Before you go, I'll send you a friend request. We'll be able to find each other and chat if you ever go online at the same time as me. Agile swiped through the menu before shooting Izuku a friend request. One he happily accepted. I really need to learn more about this game, Izuku thought before walking away. He opened his menu before clicking into settings. He scrolled through the settings and got to the bottom. Agile, Izuku yelled out to the man. Yamikumo, Agile asked, running over to him to see what was wrong. You okay? Where's the exit button? Izuku asked in a panic. What do you mean? It's right there. Agile pointed to the section on the menu, only for his voice to die down when he saw the option had vanished. What the hell? I barely ran into any bugs in the beta test. And the ones I did find weren't as bad as this, Agile muttered, stretching his beard with a pensive look on his face. Hold on, I'll try to contact the game master. While Agile tried to contact the game master with little success, he turned to Yamikumo. This is going to be a problem. No one can move their bodies in the game. Do you have anyone living with you to take off your headset? My mother, Izuku whispered in relief, knowing she would be able to take off the headset. Agile breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. My wife should be able to remove the headset. But I'm sure it won't come to that. The game will probably be fixed in minutes. Izuku smiled, but without warning, he was enveloped in a bright light. When the light died down, Izuku found himself standing where he first spawned. In the town center, many others were also present, and it looks like more were being teleported in. Yamikumo, you good? Agile asked from his side, sticking close to the boy. Why yeah, I'm good. Are you okay? Izuku asked, wanting to make sure his first friend in this game wasn't hurt in any way. Thankfully, it seemed he was fine. What happened? He asked. Before Agile could answer, someone cried out. Up there. Izuku looked up and watched as a red error warning flashed on the top of the sign. Soon that warning turned into 2, then 4, then multiplied to cover the entire sky. What looked to be blood seeped through the lines of the error warning, but didn't fall down onto them. Static filled the air as a giant hooded figure appeared before them, looming above them all. Is that the game master? Someone questioned from within the crowd. Izuku stared at the figure. That person was the one who controlled the game. Was he here to tell them about the exit bug? No, that couldn't be it. Why would the sky look like blood then? Maybe Theatrix. Attention, players, the figure's voice boomed out, addressing them all. Welcome to my world, a boy said close by, questioning what the man said. My name is Kayaba Akihiko, the looming presence introduced itself. I'm currently the one and only person who can control this world. Those words sent everyone into a silence as they all tried to comprehend what he said. I'm sure you've already noticed the logout on the main menu has been removed. However, this is by no means a mistake. I repeat, this is not a mistake, but a feature of the true Sword Art Online. What the hell does he mean by feature? Agile muttered angrily. You cannot log out of Sword Art Online of your own will, and nobody in the real world can remove the nerve gear or interrupt its operation. Should this be attempted, a powerful burst of microwave radiation emitted from a transmitter in the nerve gear will destroy your brain, thus ending your life. Kayaba warned everyone. Many people didn't take him seriously, but Izuku did. He'd gotten pretty good at telling whether people were lying to him or not, and this man was telling the truth. If they removed the headset, they would die. Unfortunately, it's certainly possible that a player's family or friends would ignore this warning and attempt to forcibly remove the nerve gear. Izuku's eyes widened at this information, realizing that they could all die, and that was only reinforced with Kayaba's next words. As proof, 213 players have retired from both this world and the real one permanently. Izuku's face paled at the large number of people who had died in the game. He really wished Kayaba was lying about that, but it was clear from his tone that the game master was serious. Various news channels and articles popped up around the man, talking about what was happening and the deaths of the 213 players. As you can see, news of my warning and the numerous victims are being spread worldwide. Thus, it should be safe to say that the danger of removal attempts will be minimal from now on. I hope you will all be at ease and focus on completing the game. But I'd like you all to keep this in mind. From this point on, all methods of revival in the game will no longer function. If your HP hits 0, your avatar will perish for eternity, and at that moment, the nerve gear will destroy your brain. Izuku took a step back, shaking with fear. This couldn't be real. This all had to be one horrible dream. But the look in Agile's eyes was real. The dead players were real. This wasn't a dream. Izuku shook his head, trying to push those thoughts out of his mind. Kayaba couldn't be telling the truth. The heroes would do everything in their power. The heroes will surely save us, Kayaba finished Izuku's thought. That's what you all must be thinking right now. That will not be the case. Quirks may do many things, but none will be able to counteract the nerve gear. He announced it to everyone. You will not be saved. You will need to fend for yourself because in this world of mine, you are all alone. There is only one condition you must meet to be set free, the completion of the game. You are all currently on the first floor, the lowest point in Aincrad. If you conquer a floor dungeon and defeat the floor boss, you may continue up to the next one. Assuming you manage to defeat the final boss on the 100th floor, the game will be considered cleared, and those alive will awaken in the real world, Kayaba informed them of the requirements. And lastly, I prepared a present for all of you in your item storage, please take a look. Hesitantly, Izuku opened up his inventory and found a new item inside it. Equipping it, he found himself staring back at his avatar with the new item. A hand mirror, Izuku thought. He wasn't sure why everyone had been given a mirror, but then a scream pulled him from his thoughts as someone nearby was engulfed in a bright pillar of light. Then another person was engulfed in the same light. Then another. This continued until Agile was engulfed in the light with a yell of surprise. Izuku closed his eyes and screamed out as he too was enveloped by light. To Izuku's relief, nothing bad happened. He felt normal. It wasn't until he turned to Agile did he realize what happened. He looked the same, except now he was bald with a brown goatee. Agile, Izuku questioned. This is what I look like in the real world, Agile stated, dumbfounded as he stared into the mirror. He turned to face the Izuku. It looks like you don't really change your appearance much as well. Izuku's eyes shot open and he quickly looked back into the mirror. To his horror, he found himself staring into his own green eyes. Right now, you're all probably wondering, why? Why would I, Kayaba Akihiko, the creator of Sword Art Online and the Nerve Gear, do such a thing? My goal has already been achieved. I created Sword Art Online for one reason. I created this world purely for my own personal enjoyment. Izuku's eyes narrowed at what the man just said. That was a lie. There was something else, something hidden, but without anything to go on, all Izuku could do was speculate. And now the preparations are complete. This concludes the tutorial for the official launch of Sword Art Online. Players, I wish you the best of luck. Kayaba bid farewell to everyone before disappearing as the sky turned back to normal. Everyone was frozen. Shock, fear, and panic soon took over. People started screaming, pushing, running, all wanting to escape this nightmare. But there was no way out. Izuku looked around at everyone, watching them all cry in panic. People were scared. They were confused, and they were in danger. Without thinking, Izuku turned around and began running. By the time he knew what was going on, he found himself close to the town's exit. He didn't stop, instead he continued, knowing exactly what he needed to do. He made it to the entrance before he felt a strong hand grab his shoulder, stopping him from going any further. What are you doing, Yamikumo? They need help, Izuku said, not turning around. What? We're all stuck. Heroes aren't here to save us. No one is coming to help us, Izuku closed his eyes. We're all alone. Like Kayaba said, we'll need to fend for ourselves, but that doesn't mean I can't help. Yamikumo, Agile asked, unsure of what the boy was talking about. The game just needs to be beaten, right? Izuku asked, looking Agile in the eyes. Then I'll beat it. I'll get stronger. I'll train, and I'll make sure these people can wake up in the real world. He shouted, his tone determined. I can save everyone. I can be useful. Agile was shocked at how confident Izuku sounded. This wasn't the same boy he found on the ground moments ago. He sounded determined, but he could also feel a sense of desperation in his voice. Knowing he couldn't stop Izuku, he let go. Just make sure to come visit. I don't want my new friend dying, the man stated. Izuku could only give a small nod before turning around and running out of the town. As Agile just watched him leave. Good luck out there, Yamikumo. June 26, 2138. You must have been shocked when you heard the announcement. The detective frowned. He could only imagine the fear they all felt. Some people locked themselves away from everyone, trying to wrap their heads around it, the girl stated, remembering the 2 weeks she spent holed up in a room. Some people went out to try and get stronger to survive. Her eyes glanced over to Izuku, and some people killed themselves because they didn't believe Kayaba. Izuku finished with a grim look on his face. The detective nodded, having heard how many of the players killed themselves. Some out of disbelief, others out of depression and not wanting to live in Aincrad anymore. I had always felt helpless my entire life. Being quirkless didn't really make me very popular. I lived with that my whole life and never wanted to see another person suffer like I did. So when I saw everyone panic, it made me realize everyone was powerless here, just like me. A soft smile then dawned on Izuku's face. Thankfully, Sword Art Online wasn't like real life. Skills and abilities were what kept people going, what made them feel powerful, but it also made them think they were invincible, which caused a lot of people to die. The detective saw Izuku get uncomfortable from the talk of all the dead players and tried to switch topics. Okay, well, what happened after that? Izuku sighed, and rubbed his arms. His own screams of pain filled his ears as he felt phantom pain spread across his entire body. What happened next was what put me on Kayaba's radar. When I broke the game for the first time. It had been 15 days since Izuku was trapped in this virtual hell. Apart from meeting Agile, Izuku hadn't really interacted with anyone else. Part of the reason was that he didn't really have any time to talk to other people. He was too busy taking down any monster he could find for XP. And the other part was because he didn't know how to talk to anyone else. Izuku was fine with that. He'd lived most of his life alone and away from people, so this wasn't much of a change and he doubted it would change. Izuku's current level was 10. Was that good or bad? He had no clue, but he was getting strong enough to where all the basic starter enemies he could almost cut down in one swipe, so that had to be good for something. However, he did have trouble with the more advanced enemies hidden away in dungeons. He'd upgraded his katana to a crystal katana. It packed more of a punch and had better durability than his starting weapon, so Izuku considered that a big win when he found it. His armor hadn't really changed much. He'd gotten some metal gloves and a chestplate, but that was all he got. He also really needed to start looking for a higher grade grindstone soon. Deciding to go buy some gear, Izuku headed into bnha village. He'd heard that they had a piece of armor that offered a buff for katana-type weapons that increased the durability slightly. The only problem was that it was extremely expensive. Izuku wasn't poor by any means. All his time was spent killing enemies and completing quests given to him by NPCs, so he'd collected quite a bit of gold from that. However, he knew that it might not be enough for the armor set he wanted. Maybe I should just go and farm some weak monsters. No, that won't work. They have a 24-hour respawn timer. It would take way too long. And even then I'd only get 300 core per cycle, Izuku thought to himself as he wandered around the town, trying to think of a way to pay for the armor. Maybe I should try exploring more dungeons. They'll probably have better rewards. Son of a bitch. Izuku flinched at the angry voice and slowly turned to a short man staring at the ground with a glare. His spiky, sienna-colored hair shone as the sun reflected off it. Goddamn exiled greatsword. The man angrily kicked a small pebble near his foot. Are you okay, sir? Izuku meekly asked. The man shot him a glare, causing Izuku to shrink in on himself. No, I'm not, the man angrily claimed. There's this real powerful sword, but it's in these ruins guarded by these stupid enemies. He grumbled before examining the boy in front of him, or more specifically, the item attached to his hip. That's a katana, he muttered before shooting Izuku a glare. Every katana player I've met was used by a beta tester. Are you one of those assholes? He asked, stepping closer to Izuku. Despite being the same height, Izuku couldn't help but feel small. No. I'm not a beta tester. This is my first video game, Izuku muttered softly. The man stared him in the eyes, trying to find any trace of dishonesty, but he could find any. With a huff, he backed off. Well, noob, you picked a shit first game. So, what level are you? If this is your first game, you're probably level 5 or 6. Level 10. The man did a double take. What the hell? I'm only level 8. How the heck are you already level 10? He exclaimed before quieting down as an idea popped into his head. You know what? How about you help me out here? The ruins never get explored. I'm sure there's a lot of good loot there. If you do this job for me, I'll let you keep whatever else you find in there. Sounds good. Izuku wasn't sure how to respond. The man wanted help, and he couldn't just overlook that. Besides, he was thinking about exploring some ruins for more gear anyway. He knew ruins and dungeons often held great rewards and a lot of core. Not to mention he could sell all the unwanted equipment and get core instead. More core meant better equipment, which meant he had a better chance of survival. And a bigger chance to help others. So everyone benefited in this case. So he looked the man in the eyes and nodded with a smile. I'll do it. Izuku stood outside the entrance to the ruins. It was a castle, not a large one like people thought when they heard the word, but it was still quite big, about the size of a mansion. The walls were crumbling, vines and moss covering some of the walls. Some of the stones looked like they would crumble with a single breeze. Even though Kayaba was a villain, Izuku couldn't help but admire the level of detail he put into everything. Izuku equipped his grindstone and got to work on sharpening his sword. He wasn't going to rush in without making sure his only means of survival was in its best shape. Once his katana was sharpened, Izuku double-checked his potions and decided to head on into the castle. It was dark, damp, and it smelled of stale air. Izuku probably should have brought a torch along with him, but Izuku wasn't too fussed about that. He could see enough, and using his katana with one hand could easily get him killed, so it was best for him to keep both hands free at all times. Just in case. Walking through the castle, Izuku kept his wits about him, waiting for something to jump out at him, but nothing. Not too long after beginning his exploration, he came across a chest. Opening it, a large amount of items were dumped into his inventory automatically, but one caught his eye. Opening his inventory, he selected a new potion in his inventory. Its liquid was a crimson red and it had no cork, meaning it needed to be crushed or smashed to be used. It was unlike any potion or antidote he'd seen. But the name is what confused him the most. Potion of Aggression. Deciding he would test it out later, he closed his inventory and continued trudging through the castle. After a few more minutes of searching, Izuku found himself in a main room, with a bookcase. Where's the sword? I've looked everywhere, Izuku thought, throwing his hands up in the air out of frustration. This is the only room I haven't explored. It has to be in here. Izuku examined the room top to bottom, but nothing. A chest with some nice loot, but nothing. With a sigh, Izuku turned to leave, but slowed when he saw a stone poking out of the wall. Walking over with a suspicious gaze, he examined the stone closely and then pressed down on it. His suspicions were confirmed when it sunk back into place. Izuku heard the sound of gears clicking and turning. With a small thunk, the bookcase slid forward. Izuku grabbed it and swung it open like a door, revealing a staircase going down deep into the ground. Izuku couldn't see the bottom, only an empty void. Izuku shivered, not sure what was down there, but he promised that man he'd help get the sword. Down I go, Izuku muttered softly to himself before walking down the stairs and into the dungeon. This place was a labyrinth. That was the first thing that came to Izuku's mind as he navigated through the countless corridors of stone. He even had to use a torch to see his way forward. However, he played it smart and lit every torch he passed. So if he was attacked, he could easily discard the torch and fight in a lit area. Soon he arrived in a large open room. Nothing about it yelled out to Izuku, but his eyes were drawn to something odd. Old prison cells with its doors resting on the ground, having been broken off their hinges. That's when it clicked. They were exiled knights. It was clear this game liked to add lore, so this must have been where the traitorous knights were sent. Getting a chill, Izuku took a step backwards, getting ready to leave. That was before he heard a slight creak from behind him. What the? Izuku quickly turned around to see something swing a giant sword down onto him. With a yelp, he leapt to the side, the sword breaking the ground where he once stood. Quickly scampering to his feet, he turned to face his attacker. It was a tall and lanky enemy, standing at twice Izuku's height. It was covered in rusty armor. Its helmet covered its face. Lines ran down the front, covering the creature's face along with black mesh. 2 long strips of cloth rested on each side of the helmet, going down to its shoulders. A dirty white veil attached to the back of the helmet. It was so long that it ran down to the ground. And finally, it held a large sword that was cracked and covered in rust. In short, Izuku was terrified. He slowly took a step back and began running the other way. That must have been the reason no one came here. It wasn't because they weren't interested. People did come here, but were killed by those things. He skidded to a stop, however, when he saw another exiled knight stand in front of him. Quickly unequipping the torch and switching to dual-hand his katana, he stood his ground. The exiled knight leant to the side before swinging his sword in a large horizontal arc. Izuku jumped back, but the sword glanced his stomach, taking away nearly half his health. Hissing in pain, Izuku grabbed his stomach before quickly diving out of the way as the knight jumped to him whilst swinging its sword down. Getting to his feet, Izuku swung his sword at the knight, slicing it and dealing a decent chunk of damage. Frail, but really powerful, Izuku thought, fixated on the enemy right in front of him. But because he was so hyper-fixated, he failed to notice the exiled knight had walked up behind him. The breath left Izuku's lungs as he felt a searing hot pain in his chest. His eyes traveled down to see the blade of a sword pierce his stomach. The exiled knight then lifted up the sword before swinging it with him still attached to the blade. Izuku was flung off the sword due to the force and was sent flying onto the ground. His health began to rapidly fall and he could feel the strength leaving his body. The knights began turning around and beginning to leave. Izuku weakly tried to get up, but he couldn't move. He could feel himself start to lose control of his body. He tried to breathe, but found he couldn't even do that. All he could do was think. Was this how he died? In a dungeon with no one around him. He didn't want that. He didn't want to die. He thought back to his life, everything that had happened up until this point. To his mother giving him the nerve gear. Izuku's eyes narrowed as he thought about his mother. If he died here, she would blame herself. She'd given him something that had killed him. He couldn't die here. He couldn't let her feel the pain of losing the only other person in their family. He already made her worry enough, but he couldn't do this to her. Anything but this. Izuku's finger twitched as a growl tore from his lips. He had to stay alive. He had to get out. He still had people to help. He hadn't become a hero yet. He still needed to tell his mother he was safe. Gritting his teeth, Izuku flexed his fingers and lifted his hand and slammed it down on the ground as he crawled forward. His eyes filled with nothing but grit and determination. I'm not giving up here. To Izuku's absolute shock, his decreasing HP slowed down until he rested on just 1 HP. The exiled knights turned around, finding that his signature had reappeared. Without any hesitation, Izuku stood up and jumped backwards, putting enough space between him and the 2 threats. Immediately drinking the strongest health potion he had, Izuku's HP shot right back up to full. His eyes shot towards the exit, but found the knights were in front of it. They were blocking the exit. He couldn't get out. He was stuck. Calm down, Izuku, he thought to himself. Be patient, watch their moves, remember what attacks they used, and wait. Izuku moved forward slowly, his katana raised to defend himself in case they swung a sword down. One of the knights hunched down before jumping at him with its sword raised into the air. Izuku rolled to the side before holding up his katana to block anything coming towards him. The other exiled knight moved forward before taking a small step backwards and raising the sword to its chest before jabbing it in front of him. Rolling to the side, Izuku waited for the next move. The first exiled knight took a step backwards and raised the sword to its chest. Stance 2, Izuku thought. As it went to jab Izuku, he quickly rolled towards it, but aimed a little to its left. He dodged the attack but was close enough to slice and dice the knight with everything he had. It swung the sword at him, but that didn't matter as Izuku coincidentally went to attack at the same time, causing a parry. Izuku sliced the enemy, lowering its health to 0 before it exploded into very familiar shards. Izuku quickly threw a throwing knife at the last enemy. It staggered for a second, but that was all he needed. Izuku dashed forward and sliced the knight's leg, then its side, then its neck. Izuku was using the heaviest attacks he could, and the enemy kept getting stunlocked. Izuku lowered it to half its health. Before the knight could get up, Izuku knew what he had to do. Critical hits are caused by parries, strength potions, and Izuku quickly circled around it before jamming his katana through the enemy's body before yanking the sword out. With a metallic groan, it dropped to its knees before vanishing in an explosion of shimmering crystals. Backstabs, he whispered hoarsely. Izuku Midoriya, level 11. Izuku collapsed to his knees and let out a small sigh of relief before devolving into a fit of laughter. He didn't die, he was still alive. After a few minutes, he went silent and looked up at the roof as he calmed down from that harrowing encounter. He'd learned a good amount from that fight. The most important one being never let an enemy out of your sight. Slowly standing up, Izuku looked at a notification in front of him letting him know what the exiled knights dropped. A tired smile came to his face as the contents were added to his inventory. One of which included a certain sword. Found you. Wow, I'm shocked you didn't get a game over, the man scoffed in disbelief. Although he could help but develop a small amount of respect for the noob. Game over. Is that when you beat the game? The man sneered at the boy. No, well, it can mean that, I guess. A game over is when you died. And somehow you came back alive from that hellhole, the man told Izuku. Izuku nodded, taking in that new information. It was hard. Those knights were super strong. Twice as strong as. Don't care. The man shut Izuku up, who flinched at the tone. A deal's a deal, the angry man said before opening up his menu and going into the trade window. Izuku did the same thing and inserted the sword into the box. Once the trade was finished, he equipped his new weapon and a toothy grin came to his face. Now this is more like it. Izuku stayed silent as the man admired his new weapon before remembering about him. Well, I'm gonna go kill some monsters with this bad boy. Try not to die. Without waiting for a response, the man ran off, leaving Izuku standing in the middle of the town center. He was about to leave when a young girl ran up to him, stopping him in his tracks. Hey, I overheard you did a job for that guy, the girl said with a sheepish look. If you don't mind, there's a piece of armor in a dungeon not too far from here. I don't want to die here, so I want to have as much protection as I can. Yo, you taking on job requests? A random man walked over to Izuku's side. There's this really rare material that a super strong enemy drops. Do you think you can kill it and grab the material for me? Probably. Izuku wasn't sure what to say. For the first time in his life, people were actively seeking his help. Another person then walked up and joined the group, then another, then another. Before long, Izuku looked around at the small crowd of players who wanted his help with obtaining certain items, completely baffled. At the time he didn't realize it, but taking that one request would eventually make him one of Sword Art Online's most sought-after players. June 26, 2138. Did you know that willpower is produced from the prefrontal cortex? Izuku questioned the detective, leaning over and resting his chin on his palm. I didn't know that until Kayaba told me. The detective hummed in thought. So how did you survive that attack? It was part of Kayaba's goal, the girl spoke up. Noticing she interrupted, she smiled sheepishly and looked at Izuku. Her boyfriend merely smiled and held his hand out, allowing her to continue speaking for him. Kayaba added a glitch in the program. One that allowed people a way to potentially cheat death in the game. The headset measured bioelectric signals in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain is meant for processing memory and meeting goals. Which I guess makes sense since you're trying to not die, Izuku muttered softly to himself before snapping out of it. Sorry. The more it sparks, the more code is injected into your character. Eventually, it gets to a point where it inputs enough code into your character that it activates a flag in the system to leave you alive with one hit point left, thus allowing you to survive a lethal blow. Izuku tried to retell what Kayaba told him and his girlfriend. How many people were aware of this cheat? I'd only seen myself and Asuna use this ability. But Kayaba said over 500 players were able to cheat death using their will to survive. Although Kayaba said I was the only one to do it multiple times, Izuku informed the detective with a small smile. I was only able to do it in the final fight. Izuku never told me it was willpower that kept him alive those 3 times he was able to utilize it, the girl, Asuna, stated. To be fair, I never knew it was willpower until Kayaba told us. I thought it was a unique skill until the final fight, Izuku defended himself. Why didn't people spread this around? Wouldn't it have kept more people alive if they knew how to cheat death constantly? The detective questioned. No, Izuku shook his head. The game didn't work that way. The reason was that it was treated as an ability. And every ability has a cooldown. If you survived a killing blow and got hit right after without healing up, you die. Izuku laid down the harsh truth of the special ability. Thankfully, 2 of the times Izuku utilized the ability, he always healed up right after before rushing back into the fight. Most of the other people who cheated death didn't get so lucky. Those who did survive wrote it off as nothing more than sheer luck. The only person who knew about it was Izuku after experiencing it for the second time, and even he didn't know how it worked. Well, at least you found a way to cheat death, the detective said, before mentally slapping himself. Of course the boy cheated death. Him and Asuna wouldn't be in front of him if they hadn't. Izuku looked to the ground and let out a small chuckle. Not entirely, he stated, confusing the detective. He noticed Asuna looking at him, concern etched into her features. While willpower was needed to activate it, sometimes you just can't reach that level of willpower. That's why so many people died. And I fell victim to that as well. The detective squinted in confusion before his eyes widened. Wait, are you saying? The man watched in horror as Izuku nodded, and his quirk detected his next claim as a truth. Not long after beating the first boss, I died. Another 15 days passed with not much happening. People began to catch wind of Izuku's services. His name wasn't very well known yet, but he was popular enough to where he did get occasional people requesting his help. In order to keep track, he'd purchased a journal where he would write down new jobs and go through them in order. Since taking on this little venture, he'd completed 12 requests and was still working through the remaining jobs. The good thing about what he did was the amount of XP he was earning. Since he was constantly on the move and always fighting enemies, he was getting more XP and was sitting at level 13. He would have continued with his work, but then he heard about a meeting to discuss how to progress through the game. Most didn't take it seriously. After all, plenty of meetings had been held, but offered nothing of value. Little by little, the amount of meetings decreased until there were barely any. But Izuku still went to every meeting, just in case someone had gained new information on the game, or if the first floor boss had been located. And a meeting a month after the game had begun. That had to hold at least some valuable information. So pocketing his journal and putting all 7 of his jobs on hold, Izuku made his way to Tolbana. Izuku sat on some stairs at an amphitheater, looking around at the amount of people. The last time there were over 100 people at one of these meetings, but now there were only 45 people, including himself. Most of them seated up front or in the middle. Izuku sat up the back. He still wasn't sure how to talk to other people, so he didn't want to risk it. The most interaction he did was talking to his clients about what they wanted, and even then it was short and normally they were in control of the conversation. And if Izuku was being honest, he was fine with that. He didn't consider himself a good talker, and believed that he would mess up if he talked too much, so he stayed silent and did what people asked, just like in the real world. Izuku looked at the front as a blue-haired man with bronze armor walked up to the stage and cleared his throat. Thank you for coming today. My name is Diabel, and I like to consider my job as a knight. The man was instantly heckled by other players for his declaration. Despite there being no job system in the game, it didn't stop people from developing their own. There were people who you could pay for information, people who crafted weapons from rare materials, and an incredibly small number of players who took on jobs to kill or collect certain items. Those players were often classed as mercenaries. That job wasn't popular with players looking to do something collecting rare loot only to give to other players. Most were only looking out for themselves or people in their clan. But Izuku was happy to help others, since to him, it meant they would have a better shot at surviving this death game. It was also why he did it for free. Pro heroes shouldn't wait to get paid before they started saving people. They should do it because it was the right thing to do. However, Izuku was still considered a mercenary despite not being paid for his efforts. Diabell's face grew serious, which caused the laughter to die down. Today, my party found the stairs leading to the topmost floor of that tower. The man pointed to a large tower off in the distance which connected the first floor to the second. That means that we will reach the first floor boss tomorrow. If Diabell had everyone's interest before, he now had their attention. We need to defeat this boss and reach the second floor, then we can tell everyone waiting in the town of beginnings that this game can be beaten. Everyone present here shares this duty. Do you all agree? All the players sitting below Izuku cheered and clapped. Izuku did neither of these, but he did have a big smile on his face. This was it. The first step towards freeing everyone from this place. They would beat the boss and then move up the next floor, and with how many players there were, nothing could stop them. Alright, then let us begin our planning. Diabell regained everyone's attention. First, divide into parties of 6. An ordinary party has no chance against a floor boss. We'll need to form a raid group using multiple parties. Izuku's smile fell as he heard the first instruction. This was going to be a bit of an issue. Scratch that, this was going to be a major issue. What if he messes up? What if his teammates don't like him or he annoys them? No one at school liked him, so what if the same thing happens here? As he thought about the worst-case scenarios, everyone began teaming up. Once Izuku broke out of his thoughts, he quickly looked around for someone to team up with. Thankfully, he found someone wearing a cloak with a rapier on their side. He slowly got up and shuffled towards the player. Hey, everyone has already got into their P parties. Do you mind teaming up? He nervously asked. The figure didn't move and continued to look forward to all the players. You don't have any friends you'd rather team up with? A female voice asked. Izuku's eyes shot wide open when he realized he was talking to a girl. No. I don't play with others. Taking a breath to calm his nerves, he spoke up again, this time with less of a stutter. I'm a solo player, he stated. The girl nodded, and Izuku didn't know if that was about his answer, or his request to team up. With a shaky hand, Izuku opened his menu and sent the girl a party invite. She looked at the invitation and reluctantly accepted it, allowing Izuku to see her username. Asuna, he read in his mind. Well, it looks like it'll just be STW. Got room for one more. Izuku turned his head to see a boy around his age, maybe a year younger than him, with neat black hair and black eyes. Oh, of course, Izuku nodded happily. Even if more people meant more of a chance to screw up, it also meant they had a better chance at survival. He quickly sent the boy an invitation. With any hesitation, he accepted it. Kirito, Izuku thought, looking at the boy's username. Nice to meet. Just a second. Everyone turned their heads to see a man walk to the front where Diabell was. Izuku's eyes widened at the sight of the exiled greatsword. Isn't that the guy the first helped? Izuku thought, recognizing him as his first client. Subconsciously, his hand clutched his chest where he was stabbed by the exiled knight. Once at the front, he turned around and faced the crowd. I'm Kibo and I want to say something before we take on the boss. He yelled out, now having everyone's attention. Some of you here need to apologize to the 2,000 who have died so far. Everyone looked around at each other, confused at what the man was talking about, but a few knew who Kibo was talking about. Kibo, are you referring to the beta testers? Diabell asked. Of course I am. Kibo yelled before looking towards everyone with a spiteful glare. On the very day that this stupid game started, the beta guys ditched us beginners, they all disappeared into the game. They took all the good hunting spots and easy quests for themselves, so only they could get stronger. We had to wait 24 hours for that to reset, only for another beta to take their place. And then, they just ignored the rest of us. I'm sure someone here was in the beta. They should get on their knees and apologize, and give up all the items and money they've hoarded. Otherwise, we can't trust them to protect us as party members, and they shouldn't trust us. He finished his long rant. Kirito subtly flinched next to him at the man's words, however neither Izuku or Asuna caught that subtle gesture. Izuku could sympathize with the angry man. It was true that beta testers did take many of the good quests and hunting spots first. Izuku was no exception. Despite not being a beta tester, he did take many good quests, even if it was unknowingly, but that didn't mean he agreed with the man. The beta testers were able to gather valuable information to share with other players. And it seemed someone else thought the same. May I speak up? A deep voice spoke up. Izuku's eyes widened at the familiar voice and a large smile broke out on his face as he and the others turned to see a tall man with dark skin walk towards the front. Agile bowed to the crowd in a sign of respect. My name is Agile. Kibo, tell me if I have this right. You're saying that because the beta testers didn't take care of them, many beginners died. They should take responsibility, apologize, and provide compensation. Correct? The man questioned. Why yeah. Kibo tried to stand his ground, but he was kinda scared of the tall buff man. Agile then reached into his pocket before pulling out a small journal with a brown cover. A book that Izuku regularly consulted when going off into new areas of the floor. You got this guidebook, didn't you? It was provided for free at the item store. Sure, I did. Why? Kibo narrowed his eyes, unsure of where this conversation was heading, unaware of the bombshell Agile was about to drop on him. This guidebook was compiled from information given by the beta testers. Kibo froze in shock. He had no clue who had written the book and just assumed that it was a guidebook for the first floor given by Kayaba to help them get started. Everyone in the crowd murmured to each other before Agile spoke up again. The beta testers got all the good quests and hunting spots first and then banded together to write this guide for the rest of us so we would have a better chance of surviving. Everyone had access to this information. And even still, many players still died. I thought the topic of discussion here was what we could learn from their deaths, and how that could help us defeat the boss. Agile spoke to everyone present. One by one, the other players began agreeing with what Agile was saying. Said man smiled at his work before turning around to go sit back down. Kibo huffed, but didn't kick up a fuss. Instead he followed Agile's lead and took a seat. Okay, now that that's been cleared up, let's continue. Diabell pulled out his own guidebook before flipping to the page on the boss. If you check page 162 in the guidebook, you'll find all the information needed. I want everyone to read this before morning. But as for the basic information, we'll go over that now. According to it, the boss's name is Ilfang the Kobold Lord. We will also be facing the minions at his side known as Ruin Kobold Sentinels. He has 4 health bars, and when the last one is in the red, he switches to a curved sword-type weapon called a Talwar. His attack pattern also switches. He explained. Everyone flipped open to the guidebook and began reading about the boss. If they wanted a better chance at survival, the only hope they had was this little guide written by the beta testers. Once they got the basic idea, Diabell nodded. That concludes this briefing. Lastly, core will be automatically distributed. XP goes to the party that defeats the monster, and if someone receives an item from killing an enemy, they get to keep it. Any objections? No one spoke up against him. When hearing no one complain, Diabell smiled. Okay, we leave tomorrow at 10 in the morning. See you there. Everyone got up and began to leave, Kirito and Asuna included. However, Izuku stayed behind. He needed to talk to someone. Agile, Izuku called out, running towards the man. A grin broke out on Agile's face when he heard the familiar voice, Yamikumo. How are you? He asked, happy to see his little buddy again. I've been good, Izuku said, happy to talk to his first friend in Sword Art Online. I've started doing jobs for other people, like collecting items and loot from dungeons or enemies. You became a mercenary? Agile asked, shocked. Out of all the jobs he thought Izuku might do, being a merc wasn't one of them. It was one of the most dangerous things to be in the game, up there with a solo player, and Izuku was both. How's your combat going? Are you doing okay? He asked, worried. Izuku blinked, unsure of why Agile was worried about him. He wasn't worth worrying about. Everything's going great. I've been using the katana for most fights, but I'm starting to feel like that isn't enough. I've tried using throwing knives, but they just don't do enough damage. Izuku admitted his concerns with his combat. Agile was the person who helped him pick out his first weapon. If there was anyone he trusted enough to pick his weapon for him, it was the man in front of him. Humming, the tall man brought his hand up to his chin and thought long and hard. Why not try a bow? Agile suggested. It's costly to keep stock of arrows if you aren't constantly searching for loot, but it's well worth it. With that in your katana, you can easily tackle short and long range. As for throwing knives, mess around with them a little. I don't know much about them, but Kayaba wouldn't have added them in if they were as weak as you say. Hearing someone calling him, Agile turned around and waved. Sorry, I have to go talk to my party. I'll catch you later though. Izuku nodded with a smile. He shot him one final grin before walking over to his team, leaving the young boy all alone. Izuku stood there thinking about what Agile had told him. The bow was a good idea, but for the throwing knives, maybe he needed to do something unique. Maybe he just needed to think outside the box. Skills were necessary to live in Sword Art Online. That was known by every single player. Combat skills were the most important, then followed by armor skills. After those two, people could pick and choose depending on their playstyle. Izuku mostly trained with the two-handed curved blade skill since he used a katana as his main weapon. Every skill could be leveled up to level 1000, although no one had managed to crack even level 100 on one skill. The harder the enemy, the faster the combat skill would go up. It worked very similarly to XP. However, the other types of skill required other things. For the hiding skill you needed to stay undetected in dangerous areas for long periods of time. Skills took time and effort to level up. It wasn't just something you could decide to do one day. Out of all the skills in the game, cooking was a skill Izuku didn't think he'd try out. Mostly because he believed it didn't offer any benefit other than a nice tasting meal. That was until he learned that certain dishes could give temporary buffs. That's when he decided to level it up. He didn't get much time to level up the skill, so he sat at a very modest level 27. Thankfully, his level didn't impact how the meal tasted. That aspect depended on the quality of the ingredients he used. However, that didn't mean the meal couldn't come out bad. His first attempts were, quite frankly, horrible. The meat was burnt, the vegetables somehow rotted, and the taste would easily be considered a crime against God. He soon got the hang of it, and his remaining attempts were a success. He'd made meals with very small buffs. He knew that the higher the level, the stronger the buffs, but Izuku wasn't too fussed. Any buff, no matter how small, could be the difference between life and death. Unfortunately, not all of them gave him buffs. One of the meals he cooked was simply just a regular meal. Since Izuku was always on the move, he didn't have the time to just enjoy a nice and simple meal. When he did eat, it was something small and quick so that he could get moving again. But since tonight he would be staying in the town and not going out, he thought this would be the perfect time to enjoy a simple meal. In the town center, there was a massive party being held by the players, all celebrating the fact that they were going to take on the first boss. Everyone was talking, sharing stories or just drinking while looking up to the sky. Izuku would have joined them, if not for the fact that he broke out in a cold sweat just looking at the massive group. He didn't want to hang with them all. He would probably just kill the mood. So he decided to head to the back of the party to eat his meal. Making his way to a darker part of the party, Izuku froze when he saw Asuna sitting by herself. He was about to turn away when he paused. There wasn't really anywhere else to go, and he didn't want to leave. So mustering up his courage, he walked over to the cloaked girl. May I sit here?" Without looking at him, Ansa nodded. Izuku sat down next to her, keeping a decent amount of distance. She was holding a piece of caramel bread. One was given out to everyone for their dinner. Many others just bought a more filling meal, or ate something that they had previously cooked. Even though you couldn't die of starvation, you could trick your brain into feeling full, and with just a piece of caramel bread, she was going to be hungry unless she found something else to eat. Izuku looked down at his salt-grilled meat and vegetable bowl, then to her piece of bread. Without even a second of thought, he held it out to Asuna, catching her attention. Here, why you can have this, Izuku said with a shaky smile, not used to talking to girls. Asuna turned her head and looked at the meal being offered to her. I didn't come here to eat good food, she bluntly stated. Izuku flinched at her tone, but didn't let up. Well, I just thought that you might enjoy this. Why, you're my teammate, and I just thought this might be a better meal, he whispered, looking to the ground. Asuna didn't move for what felt like eternity before reaching out and taking the meal from Izuku's hands. She poked it before taking a small part and putting it in her mouth. There was a brief moment of pause, causing Izuku to worry that it wasn't good. But she quickly ate the meal at such a speed that left Izuku in a state of shock. After finishing it, she let out a tiny burp. It's good, she quietly muttered. I'm glad. Izuku breathed out a sigh of relief, happy that the meal was good. You cook? Kirito asked, walking over to his teammates. Izuku's eyes widened as he got up and bowed repeatedly to Kirito. I'm so sorry, I only had the one, please forgive me, he begged, not wanting to be hated. He was actually enjoying people not bullying him and treating him like garbage for once. He didn't want that to change. Thankfully, Kirito waved him off nonchalantly. Don't worry about it, I probably wouldn't eat it anyway, he said. The two sat down, Izuku next to Asuna and Kirito next to Izuku. He held his piece of bread and smiled while looking at it. I've been eating one of these every day since arriving in this town. Although sometimes I like to change it up, Kirito stated. Change it up how? Izuku asked. With a small smile, Kirito equipped a small jar and put it between him and Izuku. The green-haired boy smiled as he recognized the familiar jar of cream. Oh, you completed the heifer strike back, too? Izuku asked. Kirito's face turned into one of shock. You know about the quest too? Barely any beta testers knew about the quest, that's why it wasn't in the guidebook. Very few players knew about the quest, and it was one you had to actively search for to find. Narrowing his eyes, he questioned the boy. What level are you? Level 13. Yeah. Now Kirito was just confused. How many video games have you played? He questioned, shocked that someone was a higher level than him, even if it by one level. This is actually my first video game, Izuku stated, shocking Kirito even further. Asuna showed no reaction to the news. Wow, Kirito said, both in shock and awe. It was rare for someone to excel at something they'd never done before, and it looked like Izuku's rare talent fitted this shitty situation perfectly. So what weapon are you using? I'm using a katana, Izuku said, equipping his katana and showing the pair. Aren't they really fragile? Asuna questioned, still not taking much interest in the conversation between the two boys. Katanas lose sharpness the more they're used. They were nerfed, since katanas never had the sharpness feature in the beta test. At least from what I've heard, Kirito quickly added. Izuku hummed before they settled into a conversation about their time in the game. Izuku learned that Kirito and Asuna were both solo players just like him, making him feel a bit better since he was among others just like him. He told them both how he was a mercenary, and that apparently was a shock to Kirito, who said he didn't consider him the type. Izuku didn't know if that was a compliment or an insult, but he just took it as the former. After a couple hours of just talking and sitting in silence when they had nothing to chat about, everyone began to leave and settle in for the night. They needed all the energy they could get for what was about to happen. Izuku was about to get up and head to bed when he realized that this could be the best opportunity to ask about the potions he got over 2 weeks ago. Hey, Kirito, he spoke up, catching the boy's attention. Do you think you can tell me what these are? I can't seem to find information in the guidebook, Izuku admitted, handing him one of the potions. Kirito examined it before making a weird face, almost as if he was holding a ticking time bomb in his hand. He handed the potion back to Izuku and shook his head with a small frown. Just sell those, they'll do more harm than good. What are they? Asuna questioned, interested in the potion in Kirito's hand. Potion of aggression. I've heard from the beta testers that they're trying to study them before adding it to the guidebook. They weren't in the beta, so the specifics are unknown, Kirito said. But from what I know, the potion gives the user an effect which makes every nearby enemy focus on that player. He explained the potion's effects to the two. It's risky, since you could be in a field with the boars and farm them repeatedly by applying this potion, but if a random mini-boss spawns, you're in a lot of trouble. Are you a solo player as well? He asked. The boy nodded, which caused Kirito to shake his head. How many of these potions do you have? I've collected around 10 of them, Izuku answered meekly. Either sell them, or throw them away, Kirito bluntly advised him, catching Izuku slightly off guard at how blunt he was. Solo players shouldn't even use those. Hell, no one should. They're a death sentence. If you want to use these, you will die, he warned the green-haired boy. Izuku gulped before looking down at the red potion in his hand. His grip tightened on the glass, but not enough to crush it and activate it. His mind pushed what Kirito said to the back to store for later. But Izuku was confident he wouldn't need the advice. He would just be really careful. Looking back on the advice given to him, he should have taken Kirito's advice more seriously. Because while the potion ended up saving 4 lives, it took his own in the process. The next morning, the group traveled to Ilfang's location earlier than the others. Kirito was talking strategy with his fellow teammates. Despite wearing a hood that covered her face, it didn't seem she was paying attention, which annoyed him to no end. Thankfully, Izuku was nodding along and asking questions when confused. Let's go over it again, Kirito said. For the 4th time, Asuna questioned. Strategy is important, Izuku tried to defend Kirito. We leftovers are supposed to target the boss's helpers, the ruined kobold sentinels, Kirito debriefed the pair for the 4th time that day. I'll use a sword skill to knock their poles up. The second I do, switch in. Switch. Both Izuku and Asuna questioned. Kirito had never used that term before when he was explaining what to do. Realizing that, he also came to another conclusion. Is this the first time you two have ever been to a party? Asuna nodded while Izuku scratched the back of his head with a shaky smile. Well, I don't really have many friends to play with, and I normally go to places regular players don't, he explained. Kirito nodded along. He couldn't really judge the two for being loners, otherwise he'd be a massive hypocrite. Switching is when players switch positions mid-battle to recover HP while another player rushes into attack. When a switch happens, the enemy will target the new target. It also burdens the AI because the monster needs to adapt to the new playstyle of whoever it's fighting. Does that make sense? He asked, hoping he explained it well enough. Yes, thank you, Asuna nodded in understanding. So the enemy can adapt to new enemies, maybe that's only for higher-leveled bosses, which would make sense because they need to be harder, but then how would they adapt? Does that mean they can pull out more weapons? Izuku devolved into a mutter storm, but neither Asuna nor Kirito told him to shut up. They just allowed him to brainstorm all the way to the boss's room. The group soon stood in front of the door to the boss room. While the 3 of them waited for the others, Izuku grinded his katana back up to 63% from 50%. He hoped that this was enough to get him through the battle. Note to self: the night before a boss fight, always sharpen the katana, he thought. But before he could grind his sword any further, the rest of the raiding party arrived. Diabell moved in front of the door and addressed everyone with a confident tone. Listen everyone, I have only one thing to say, he stared at them all with a smile. Let's win. The group cheered in response. Diabell nodded and opened the door, leading them all into a long and wide hall. The room filled with light, letting them all see a tall, red creature with a tail. It carried an axe and shield. Ilfang the Kobold Lord, Izuku thought before his eyes drifted to the creature's side, where 3 other armored enemies stood, wielding large maces that required both hands to use. And there are the sentinels, Ilfang roared loudly as the sentinels rushed towards the large group of players. Commence attack, Diabell roared. All the players yelled as they all ran towards the enemies, beginning the fight. Diabell was quick to command the groups, taking the role of the leader. Squad A, Squad C, switch. As the teams switched out, he noticed Kobold getting ready to use a skill. Squad B, block. Squad B rushed towards Ilfang. Agile managed to parry Ilfang's attack, allowing Kibo to get in a critical hit with the exiled greatsword, taking away a good chunk of health. Squad C, keep your guard up and prepare to switch in right about. Diabell waited until Ilfang was staggered, giving them the perfect opportunity. Now, Squad C quickly ran in, giving Squad B some breathing room time to regain some HP. But Diabell wasted no time in ordering the others. Squad D, E and F, keep the sentinels off us. Got it, Izuku called out. He was a part of Squad F with his 2 teammates, who all worked on killing a sentinel. Switch. Kirito shouted as he parried an attack. Izuku rushed in and cut the enemy 3 times in a zigzag pattern, but before it could raise its weapon, Izuku jumped back. Switch. Number 3. Asuna shouted as she rushed forward past Izuku with her rapier drawn and began to attack so fast that her blade was a blur. Rapier. Low damage, but it allows for fast attacks, but she's attacking faster than I've ever seen anyone do. Amazing, thought, staring in awe as she quickly dispatched the enemy. But he couldn't relax. He had to stay on his toes. Kirito. Duck. Kirito dropped to the ground as a kobold sentinel swung its mace at Kirito's head, but missed. Thanks, Yamikumo. He nodded before quickly fighting back. Just as he finished killing the sentinel, Ilfang let out a roar, which caused everyone to raise their arms in front of their face to block the wind pressure. It threw away its axe and shield, just like the guidebook said it would. Stand back. Diabell ordered everyone as he grasped his weapon and stared down Ilfang before rushing him. Huh, weren't we all supposed to surround it? Izuku thought, getting nervous at the change of plans. However, unbeknownst to Izuku, Diabell turned to look at Kirito with a small smile. Kirito's eyes widened as he realized who the man really was. Another beta tester, he thought. As Diabell rushed towards the boss, Ilfang pulled out a new weapon. A long curved single-edged blade similar to a katana, but its blade was longer. Izuku's eyes widened. Wait, the boss was supposed to have a talwar. The guidebook was wrong. Kayaba must have updated it. Izuku panicked before yelling out. Wait, that's not a talwar. Izuku cried out. He ran to try and warn the man, but was hit by a kobold sentinel, knocking him backwards. Jump back, Kirito shouted, also noticing the change in weaponry. Ilfang jumped to a nearby pillar, startling Diabell at the new move. It began jumping from pillar to pillar before landing a devastating downward slash on the man. It then swung up and hit him again before landing a powerful combo. Once done, it hit Diabell one last time, sending him flying to the side. Soon, more and more kobold sentinels spawned, doubling the previous amount. The players began fighting against it. Izuku and Kirito both ran over to Diabell. Getting down on his knees, Izuku pulled out a life potion and was about to give it to the man, but he declined it. Don't bother. It's a lethal bleed effect. Combine that with how low I am on health, it'll only prolong it. Unless you have 10 more of those potions, I'm not going to survive this, Diabell softly informed the young boy. No, there must be something. Izuku panicked, trying to search his inventory for a stronger potion, or something that could resist bleed effects, but deep down, he knew he didn't have anything. Why did you go in alone? Kirito questioned, also trying to find something to save them. Diabell watched sadly as the 2 boys who looked to be in junior high were trying to ensure his survival. He knew Kirito was a beta tester, and he was sure the boy knew that as well, but the other one had no clue. And Diabell's last action wasn't going to be putting a target on Kirito's back. The last time this boss was defeated, the player who landed the final attack got a bonus, he stated. He watched as his health neared 0, but he wasn't afraid, he'd already accepted death. Please, you two, defeat this boss for everyone, and with his final words, he shattered into particles. Dying both in the game, and in the real world. Everyone could only look on as they fought to stay alive. Izuku's hair darkened his face as he gritted his teeth before his face took on an eerily calm expression. Thank you, Diabell, for everything that you've done for us, he whispered softly before standing up. They'd come so close, and they weren't going to give up now. They couldn't die here, he wouldn't allow it. Squads E and F, focus on support. Izuku commanded loudly, looking towards the others, startling them. Squads A and C, attack the sentinels. Squads B and D, focus on defense. If one of you gets to yellow health, switch out and heal up. No one else will be dying here today. Everyone was startled by the new commands, but didn't argue. Someone needed to fill the leadership void. Izuku nodded before turning towards the boss. Kirito, Asuna, let's finish this, Izuku said, holding his katana towards Ilfang. Kirito and Asuna both were stunned by the complete change in personalities, but quickly nodded and held their weapons close. Go. The trio rushed towards Ilfang, who got ready to use an attack, but Izuku was able to time his parry perfectly, leaving it open for a critical hit. Switch, he called out, stepping back so Asuna could attack. However, she wasn't close enough, so by the time she made it to Ilfang, it had already recovered and was getting ready to attack. Asuna. Ilfang slashed at Asuna, but to Izuku's relief, she dodged it. Her cloak was destroyed in the process. A beautiful girl with long chestnut hair and hazel eyes filled Izuku's mind as he watched her hit the boss so hard it was sent skidding back a few meters. But he quickly regained focus as he watched it charge Asuna. Switch, Izuku shouted out, running past Asuna and countering the attack. Switch, he shouted as he ran behind Ilfang, hoping to switch and do a critical hit. Kirito ran forward and charged up an attack before slashing his sword at Ilfang, but to his shock, the creature dodged and winded up before swinging his weapon towards him like a bat. Crap, switch, Izuku shouted. Ilfang took a step back to get closer to the new target. The no dachi millimeters away from hitting Kirito as the Kobold Lord turned around and focused on the new enemy, still swinging his weapon. Izuku was hit with the no dachi and sent flying into a wall, creating a massive dust cloud that obscured him from everyone's vision, but not even a second later he rushed back out while drinking a health potion as fast as he could as he ran to rejoin the battle. Switch, Asuna yelled out as she ran forward, but Ilfang managed to get a hit of both her and Kirito, sending them flying past Izuku, who was dashing forward, getting one of his katana skills ready. He dashed around Ilfang in a square pattern and delivered 4 slices to its legs before ending up in his original position and delivering a powerful vertical slice that did major damage. One last hit, Izuku cried out, getting ready to swing his sword, but before he could, Ilfang let out a deafening roar, the pressure of which sent the 3 of them flying back. However, Kirito managed to stay on his feet long enough. So when Izuku flew back towards him, Kirito caught his feet before pushing him back towards Ilfang with all his might. Izuku could hear everyone screaming behind him, but he blocked it all out. Time seemed to slow down for him as he got closer and closer to Ilfang, who had no way of defending itself. With his katana pulled back and a fire burning in his narrowed eyes, he took in a deep breath. This was for Diabell, and for everyone who died believing this game was unwinnable. Game over, Izuku yelled at the top of his lungs before slashing his sword across the creature's neck. Ilfang let out a loud roar before shattering into particles, leaving nothing behind. Izuku fell to the ground and rolled around a few times before skidding to a halt. He slowly sat up and breathed out a sigh of relief as Asuna and Kirito rushed over to make sure he was okay. Looking up, he was met with a familiar notification. Izuku Midoriya, level 14. With a small chuckle, he also got another notification, letting him know a new item had been added to his inventory since he got the last attack bonus. Just like what Diabell said. We did it, someone yelled out before the room became deafeningly loud as everyone celebrated their win. XP began to spread throughout the players, with the most going to Kirito, Asuna and Izuku due to being the party that defeated Ilfang. Izuku sighed in relief before laying down on the ground, feeling completely exhausted after that fight. His eyes looked over to Kirito and Asuna and gave them a smile. You two did amazing, he complimented them. Don't count yourself out, Agile said as he walked over. You were able to coordinate us when everything went to hell. This victory belongs to you, he smiled. Izuku shook his head. No, it belongs to all of us, including Diabell. If it weren't for him, we probably wouldn't have gotten this far. The sound of footsteps approaching caused Izuku to look up. He saw Kibo standing above him with his signature scowl. Izuku got ready for him to begin shouting at him, but that never came. Instead the man extended his hand. Izuku looked down at it before grabbing it and being hauled to his feet. How did you know his moveset was going to change from the guidebook? Kibo asked. There was no malice in his voice. He knew Izuku wasn't a beta tester, but he was still curious. Other people nodded and soon all eyes were on Izuku, who gulped before explaining how he knew. Well, every weapon has a different moveset. Even your exiled greatsword and a regular greatsword, despite both being great swords, have different types of attacks. Not to mention the guidebook said that Ilfang was supposed to use a Talwar, which doesn't resemble a no-dachi at all. Izuku explained. The guidebook also has stuff in it that had to be changed since items like the Potion of Aggression and the Katana Durability debuff were added after the game was released, so Kayaba must have changed things to keep beta testers on their toes. Yeah, he's right, someone in the crowd said. Guess even the beta testers don't know everything, another agreed. Soon nearly everyone was nodding along with what Izuku was saying, which made him happy. Sure, he hadn't gotten rid of a lot of the hate for the beta testers, but at least he'd lowered it. Agile walked up to him with an excited look on his face. So, what did you get? He asked, asking the question that many people were thinking. Izuku gulped and looked to the ground, nervous at how many people were staring at him. Even though just a few minutes ago he was commanding them all. He opened up his inventory and navigated to the armor section of his inventory before hovering over the new set he got. Hollow Guardian's armor. Clicking it, Izuku's body was engulfed in a bright light, causing many to look away. Once it died down, they all looked back to see the new outfit. He wore a sage green kosode with a black haori on the outer layer, the colors contrasting nicely. As for the pants, he had a Tatsuki Bakama that matched his kosode. Sangu armor was attached, offering him extra protection. A forest green scarf rested around Izuku's neck, almost covering his mouth. But the biggest surprise to everyone was that there was a grindstone attached to his elbow. Izuku held up his left arm and clenched his fist. A whirring noise filled the air as the grindstone began to spin. Bringing his arm down, Izuku used his right hand and gently dragged the blade along the grindstone. The sound of stone meeting metal permeated his ears as he watched the sword's durability in shock. The grinder he was normally using took around 5 minutes to fully grind a weapon back up. This one only took 10 seconds to get its durability back from 50% to 100%. Holy crap, Izuku thought, astounded at how much better the grinding was, not to mention he could do it on the fly, essentially eliminating the biggest problem with the weapon. But all was not perfect. The set of armor only really protected his arms, thighs and shins. If someone were to stab him through the gut, he would take more damage since he had nothing protecting him. Not to mention the defense stat was low for this armor. Lower defense, but a stronger offense. That's how this armor works, Izuku thought, analyzing the piece of equipment. But to his side, Kirito was staring intensely at the boy, or to be more specific, his clothing. That isn't the code of midnight. Did Kayaba change that as well? He thought, trying to figure out why it changed. His brow furrowed as every possible scenario ran through his head, before he realized something. This isn't right. A normal boss reward would be something anyone can use, especially the first boss. But this is only usable for players with katanas, and the chances of that are slim to none. So why did it change? As Kirito stayed silent in the back, Asuna walked up to Izuku. How did you know my name? She asked, catching Izuku off guard. Pardon, Izuku questioned, unsure on what she was talking about. In battle, you used my username. How did you know that? She reiterated. Oh, when you look at your health bar, you can see a smaller gauge below it. That's where I found it, Izuku explained. Asuna looked down at the two smaller gauges below hers. Yamikumo and Kirito, she muttered to herself. I'm Yamikumo, and that's Kirito, Izuku stated, pointing over to Kirito, who was so engrossed in his thoughts that he could only manage to give a thumbs up. Asuna giggled softly. Oh, it's been there the whole time, she smiled at him. Izuku smiled back before opening the party menu. He then removed both Asuna and Kirito from his party, but he did send them a friend request. Asuna accepted, however Kirito didn't respond, but Izuku wasn't going to press him on it. Looking to the end of the hall, Izuku made his way down and walked up the steps, everyone else following behind him. Once he made it to the top, he stood before a giant door. Pushing it open, he looked out towards the unfamiliar environment. Izuku took a deep breath before stepping into the second floor. 1 down, 99 to go. June 26, 2138. I didn't consider that battle a victory, Izuku stated, rubbing his thumb over the back of his other hand's palm. We lost someone in that fight, so even after defeating it, I didn't feel the same pride as the others. I started training even more after the first floor boss. The detective hummed. He knew of someone else who beated themselves up when they couldn't save a civilian. Humming in thought, he then turned his focus onto the other person in the room. Miss Yuki, the detective addressed Asuna. Is there anything else you remember about the fight? Izuku was good at retelling what had occurred, but a second perspective to recall the events was always good. Asuna pursed her lips before shaking her head. No, all I can remember is wanting to kill Ilfang, even if it cost me my life, Asuna stated, reminding the detective that the Sword Art Online players were required to do mandatory therapy. At that moment in time, I didn't have anything or anyone to encourage me to keep going. Her eyes shifted over to Izuku and a soft smile spread across her face. Well, there was someone, but I didn't realize it until a bit later. The detective nodded and wrote something down before pocketing his notepad. If I'm right, people didn't clear the next floor for another 10 days. Did you two join in on the battle? I was in most of the battles, but not all. Sometimes players held secret meetings to defeat a floor boss. The smaller the party, the less core and loot had to be shared around. Out of the 75 floor bosses, not including the final boss, I only battled around 40 of them, Izuku stated. Izuku and I didn't meet up until December 20th, when he contacted me for some help, Asuna said. And why did you two meet up? Because Asuna and I were planning to kill Santa, that's why. Here you go. 10 steel tongues. Izuku handed over the item to the man who'd requested it. That particular job was one of the hardest, considering how powerful the monster was and how rare the item dropped. Took him killing around 200 of them to get all the items. But hey, he was now at level 18, had a lot of core and some decent items he could hoard and give away if one of his jobs required him to collect those specific items. I'm impressed you managed to get them all that quickly, the man calmly stated as he took the items and transferred them into his inventory. He eyed Izuku for a bit before questioning. How strong do you believe yourself to be? Oh, I'd say I can hold my own, but I doubt I'm really strong. There are definitely people stronger than I am. Izuku answered. The man hummed, and Izuku suddenly felt something off. Like all his senses were screaming to run away from this man, but he didn't show any signs of hostility. His cursor was green, meaning he hadn't attacked anyone or killed other players this month. Well, I believe you deserve a payment for taking on this job, he claimed. Izuku took a nervous step back, his foot crunching in the snow that had been falling since the 15th of December. That's okay, sir. I don't accept core anyway. Who said anything about money? The man smirked as he leaned in and whispered to Izuku. On Christmas Day, there's a secret boss. It spawns every year on the highest floor unlocked. In a forest, there will be a circle which is untouched by the snow. If defeated, it will drop a very powerful and rare item. He pulled back and gave a soft smile to the boy. Once again, thank you for obtaining these items for me. Izuku, still on edge, jumped at the sound of a loud noise behind him. He turned around to see a few players golfing off in the snow and making a racket. Then something clicked in Izuku's mind. Wait, how do you know this? He asked, turning back to face the man, only to find the man had disappeared. Izuku sat in a tavern with his head resting on his hands. He was contemplating the boss. A rare and powerful item, he thought, a pensive look on his face. He wanted to try and obtain the item. It might be a powerful weapon, or an item with an ability that could help him save and help others. The only problem is that Izuku wasn't confident in his ability to take on a boss alone. He knew he was strong, but he wasn't untouchable. He'd already faced death once, and he had no intention of facing it again. So he was left with one solution. He was a solo player, but that didn't mean he was against working with other people. After a while, Izuku groaned and flopped onto the counter. The bartender looked at him with indifference. Kirito still hadn't accepted his friend's request, and Agile had declined, saying he already had plans. That left only one other person he could ask, but he was hesitant to ask considering that it would just be both of them. Alone. But it was either that or potentially dying. So fighting away the small blush on his cheeks, he texted his only other friend who wasn't a client. Can we meet up? Izuku sat down and was prepared to wait. After around 30 minutes, the tavern door opened and Asuna walked inside. Spotting Izuku, she made her way over and sat down right beside him. Hey, Yamikumo, you wanted to talk. I wanted to ask for your help, Izuku said. Asuna raised an eyebrow as she ordered a drink. As she waited, she turned her body to face him. With what? There's a boss someone told me about. One that only spawns on Christmas, that got her attention. The bartender handed her the drink, but Asuna didn't even touch it, too focused on what Izuku was saying. It supposedly drops a powerful item. Asuna hummed and took a sip of her drink. Do you know which floor it's on? This floor. It spawns in a forest. There's supposed to be an area where the snow hasn't touched the ground. That's where the boss will spawn. Izuku told her everything he knew. Which was very little. There's supposed to be. Do you even know if it's real? Asuna questioned. Ah. Izuku shrunk in on himself and scratched the back of her head. And no, but I don't think he was lying. Asuna nodded without saying a word, and Izuku began to wonder if he did something wrong and if she didn't want to join him. She stood up and stretched her body. Okay. So what's the plan? Izuku smiled brightly before explaining what to do. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Most people would be spending it with loved ones, or getting ready for the holiday. Izuku was spending it with a pretty girl as they both plotted to kill something. Asuna had found the forest and the two had agreed to meet up at 11 p.m. on the 24th. Izuku's reasoning was that the boss spawned on the 25th of December, but they didn't know what time it would. Asuna agreed with his logic and then the two parted. Izuku then prioritized jobs that required him to battle high-level monsters in order to level up faster. In the 4 days, Izuku managed to go from level 18 to level 20, which he hoped would be enough to battle the unknown boss. Then the two met up, wandered to the forest and waited. 11:50 p.m. Asuna rested against a tree while Izuku sat on the ground, practicing taking out power healing items as fast as he could. Hey Yamikumo, why am I the only one you contacted about the boss? She asked with a hint of suspicion in her voice, glancing at the boy out of the corner of her eye. Izuku looked up at the girl with a look Asuna couldn't decipher. I don't really have many friends. Most of the people I've accepted are people looking to hire me. The only other friend besides you is Agile, and he told me he was spending time with his other friends for Christmas. He explained. What about Kirito? Asuna suggested, the suspicion in her voice gone. She looked at the time. It was late, but the date hadn't turned to the 25th of December, and they didn't know when the boss would spawn. Izuku shook his head, causing her to huff in annoyance. He never accepted my friend request, so I don't know where he is right now, he explained with a look of slight sadness. He didn't blame Kirito for not accepting his friend request. Izuku only had 2 real friends on his friends list. Agile and Asuna, not to mention Izuku didn't want to ask help from the people he assisted. To him it was like if a hero going into a dangerous mission asked someone they'd just saved to come along and help them. It just wasn't right. The subject was dropped as Izuku sat up and equipped his katana before holding it up to the grinder on his elbow. He watched as sparks flew through the air and the sharpness went back to 100%. When he lowered his katana, he could see his face in the reflection on the steel. You know, this is my first Christmas alone. Asuna hummed, looking up to see the boy look at his reflection in the sword. Every year, my mother and I would wake up early and open the presents. She always got me hero merch, mainly of All Might. I would get her various cooking books, some jewelry and some sewing materials. We'd have breakfast before watching a few Christmas movies. Then she'd bake dinner. I'd always offer to help her out, but she declined, saying that I should just relax. Izuku sighed and looked up to the sky. I should have helped her more. Maybe cook dinner for her instead. She does so much to take care of me. What about your father? Asuna questioned, hoping she wasn't crossing a line. In America working, Izuku stated, looking up to the snowflakes falling down onto them, left when I was around 4. Times were a little tough, and Dad got a promotion which required to work in America. Mum didn't want to go, but he knew this was the only way to pay for us. So after around 2 years, they got a divorce, but they're still good friends. He helps us out with the bills and calls me every now and then for a checkup to make sure I'm doing well. He calls every Christmas to wish us both a happy holiday. Sometimes he's able to come to Japan and stay with us for the holiday. Izuku chuckled softly with a nostalgic look in his eyes, remembering how excited he was when his father came to visit. Izuku's face faltered when he realized that he's probably missed countless calls from his father. I wonder how he felt when he heard what's happening to me, Izuku mumbled to himself sadly. Or how my mum must be feeling. Hey, Asuna reached and grabbed his hands, not paying attention to how red his face turned. We're making it out of here. Both of us, she said with determination laced in her voice. And then you'll be able to tell your mum that next Christmas you'd like to cook for her. Izuku felt how warm her hands were before gently squeezing them back. Thank you. I needed that. With a smile, she let go of Izuku's hands and then two of them stared at the circle where the boss was supposed to spawn. Izuku opened up his menu, made sure his items and healing potions were in the correct slots before noticing the time. 11:59 p.m. Hey Asuna, Izuku softly spoke, catching the girl's attention. 12 a.m. Merry Christmas. Out of nowhere, a large entity dropped from the sky and landed on the ground close by. The ground beneath them rumbled and a large cloud of dust enveloped the pair. Izuku let out a yelp of surprise while Asuna grunted, trying to stay on her feet. Once the dust cloud settled, the two players looked over to see a giant creature standing close by, looking at them with two red eyes looking in different directions. It wore a tattered Santa costume. One hand was a giant bag, and in the second was a great axe. Nicholas the Renegade. 3 health bars, Izuku choked out in shock. Ilfang had 4 health bars, and even then there were 3 squads dealing with the boss with 3 more on standby. Right now it was just him and Asuna. They were not equipped to handle this. Noticing Izuku's visible fear, Asuna was quick to try and encourage him. Yamikumo, we got this, she smiled at the boy. Remember, we've planned this out, and we won't give up. Izuku looked over to the girl and nodded before holding up his katana. Let's go, he shouted and the two dashed towards the boss. Nicholas the Renegade was tough, but slow. Enemies wielding weapons that were classified as heavy normally weren't fast in their hits. But the bad thing was that heavy weapons, while slow, were extremely dangerous if hit by one. This fact proved itself when Izuku failed to dodge and got slashed at by the great axe. Izuku looked down to his left to see his arm was no longer attached to his body. Where it had been cut looked just like it had been slashed, with red pixels and no blood. Izuku thought, what happened not registering in his brain before he was hit with the dull side of the axe and sent flying into a tree. Once he landed, Izuku let out a scream of pain. It was moments like this where he regretted keeping the pain setting on the most realistic setting. Heal up, I'll cover you, Asuna shouted out as she engaged Nicholas the Renegade, aiming to kill. Switch. With a grunt and a hiss of pain, Izuku got to his feet and quickly drank a health potion. He watched in amazement as particles rapidly emerged from his stump, reforming his arm and even the armor on top of it. Even the pain went away completely. He would have written notes down about it and marveled at how cool it was, but then he realized that Asuna was currently struggling against the boss. Switch. Izuku ran back in and slashed his sword on the creature's stomach, making it roar. That attack was the final one to lower it down to 2 health bars. It then abandoned the white bag and reached out to grab him. Not expecting this, Izuku instinctively rolled out of the way, barely avoiding the mystery attack. He didn't want to see what that would do to him. It didn't grab the bag again, meaning it would now use a new attack. And so the battle raged on, consisting of mostly Izuku and Asuna dodging, hitting, getting hit, healing up, and repeat. It was challenging, but having Asuna with him helped him out. If he tried to take on this boss by himself, he would have definitely died. However, when the boss was close to just 1 health bar, something happened. Asuna, whose health was in the yellow, managed to dodge a swing from the axe, but didn't react quickly in time to the grab attack. Nicholas the Renegade held the girl and snarled. Let go, Asuna croaked out as she kicked and clawed, trying to escape its grasp. And the monster obeyed, but not in a way either of them would think. With a roar, he wound up and threw Asuna straight into the sky. Izuku watched in horror as she faded the higher she went until she was just a tiny speck in the sky. Then she began to fall back down to the ground. It's fine, Izuku tried to reassure himself. If she was at full health, she would barely survive the fall. But then he remembered she wasn't, her health was in the red. It's not fine, it's not fine, it's not fine. He panicked and tried to run to where she was going to land. If he could catch her, the fall damage would be negated and she would survive. But he had no way to get around the massive boss. Izuku's panic began to rise as he realized that he needed to act now. If he wasted too much time, Asuna was going to die. Think. What can stun the boss? His mind raced through every move Nicholas the Renegade made, but nothing clicked. The closest thing he could tell was that it was stunned for like a second after hitting something with its axe. Like the weapon had. Kick back. Izuku's eyes widened and he rushed towards the boss, paying close attention to where Asuna would land. He had to time this perfectly. Her life depended on it. Switch. Gripping his katana, he activated the same skill he used on Ilfang. He began to cut in a square pattern. First was the front, then the side. But once he started dashing around his back, Izuku quickly cancelled the skill and jumped onto the back of the boss. Charging up a leap skill, Izuku kicked back off it and zoomed over to where Asuna was going to land. He rolled on the ground before quickly getting up. Holding out his arms, he almost yelled in relief when Asuna fell into them bridal style. He quickly, but gently, tilted his arms, allowing her to regain her footing. Heal up. We're almost there, Izuku ordered before rushing back in. Asuna quickly downed the most potent health potion she had, not looking fazed by the fact that she almost died, and rushed back into battle as her health went from red to green. Once the first health bar depleted, Nicholas the Renegade let out a deafening roar, blasting the pair back away from it. Izuku recognized that move. It was the same one Ilfang used when he switched to a different weapon. Second phase, he angrily muttered. These always annoyed him. Whenever he'd gotten good at predicting the enemy's moves and attacks, they decided to switch forms completely. Damn it, Asuna muttered beside him. The two players watched as Nicholas the Renegade threw away its great axe before grabbing the bag it was holding before. Reaching in, it pulled out two smaller battle axes and held one in each hand before kicking the bag away. One great axe to two battle axes. It's gonna be moving faster and its attacks will be unpredictable. But its damage should be less. I doubt it will do the throwing move now, but keep on your toes. We don't know if it has a third phase, Izuku quickly summarized. He held up his katana and grinded it on his elbow, sparks flying onto the ground below him. One more health bar. How many potions do you have? Enough, Asuna answered as she held up her rapier, the blade glinting in the moonlight. Then let's finish this. Izuku glared at the boss before engaging it for the final time. Izuku didn't keep track of time as they fought, but after what he guessed to be 5 minutes after the fight began, Asuna leapt at Nicholas the Renegade hoping to land a solid and quick hit. The boss quickly swung its weapon. Switch, Izuku yelled, hoping to confuse the boss, but it was too late. Asuna was flung back into Izuku and the two of them toppled to the ground. Groaning, Izuku looked up to see one of the axes coming down straight onto his head. With a shout of panic, he rolled to the side, the blade of the axe digging into the ground below him. Switch, Asuna shouted out, trying to give Izuku enough breathing room to heal up and get back into the fight. Countless health potions were used with a few scares every now and then, but ultimately it was all worth it. When Nicholas the Renegade was on its last sliver of health, Izuku stabbed his katana straight through its torso, finally depleting its health bar and killing the boss. It exploded into particles. The fight was over. Izuku watched as his level increased by 2, making him now level 22. And from the look on Asuna's face, she also leveled up a significant amount. Checking the time, Izuku blinked. 2 a.m. The battle was long and hard, but they did it. The two of them managed to beat a boss that was at least 10 floors above the one they were on. And just like the man said, the boss dropped an item. What did you get? Asuna asked, making her way over to him, a proud smile on her face for taking down the boss with Izuku. Divine Stone of Returning. A Stone of Returning. Maybe like a warping stone. Izuku guessed from the name alone, though it didn't look like a regular warp crystal. Wanting to know more, Izuku opened his inventory. Asuna watched as Izuku opened his inventory to check out the new item he got, and her curiosity ramped up when Izuku's jaw dropped as he stared in his inventory. Yamikumo. What's wrong? This item can revive a player within 10 seconds of them dying. Asuna stared at Izuku in disbelief. That was impossible. Kayaba said that there was no way to revive if a player died. But he was also the creator, meaning he could easily change his mind and add in a special item. Her theory made more sense when she took into account that this boss only spawns once a year. Izuku stared at the item and summoned it in his hand. Then he tried to give it to Asuna, who declined it. Quote, "You landed the final hit. That means you get to keep the item," Asuna bluntly told him, pushing his hand away every time he tried to hand her the item. Knowing he wouldn't be able to convince her to change her mind, he put the item back in his inventory and looked at the amount of core he got. It had been split with Asuna. But with how strong the boss was, the both of them now had an ungodly amount of core for players on the floor they were on now. "So, what are you going to do with the money?" Asuna asked. "Restock on healing potions and crystals. After that fight I need to get them back," Izuku stated. He wasn't about to go back to his job without a surplus of healing products. "I might have to do the same," Asuna nodded before looking at her feet. "Hey Yamikumo, later on, do you wanna go grab a bite to eat?" Asuna suggested with a smile and a shrug. It would suck to spend Christmas alone, but spending it with a friend sounds nice. Izuku froze in place, his throat going dry. He was being asked out for a meal. By a girl. A heavy blush arose on his face and he looked away from Asuna while trying to calm himself down. After a few seconds, he turned back to the girl and gave her a shy nod. "Gee, that sounds great." June 26, 2138. Fighting that boss was probably one of the smartest things I'd ever do. That item it dropped was really useful, even if it could only be used once. Izuku tapped his foot on the ground repeatedly. It had been asleep for nearly 2 years, and he'd rather not have to deal with the pins and needles afterwards. "Was it ever used?" the detective asked. Izuku's body froze. His foot stopped tapping. Asuna looked at her boyfriend. He'd told her what had happened to him during his breakdown. And she knew the effect it had on him. "Yeah, I used it when I took my first bodyguard mission in April," Izuku laughed softly to himself. Many would consider he was looking back at it fondly, but his shaking hand and strained smile said otherwise. "It didn't end well for me." It was April when Izuku was given a new type of job. The day began as many others did, Izuku going on a hunt for new items that people had requested he collect. The highest floor unlocked now was floor 33, meaning stronger enemies but also better items. But often people didn't want loot from the highest floor. There might be a weapon they've been looking for, or a certain material that could only be found on the lower floors. Which was why Izuku was on the 27th floor. He'd been asked to grab an ore which would be made into a certain type of glaive. There was a better ore on the 34th floor, and Izuku informed his client about that, but the guy adamantly requested this ore. Izuku didn't question what people wanted. If they needed something, they'd hire him to go collect it for them. It was his job after all. He could request something better, but if they didn't want it then he wasn't going to force it upon them. Was he happy doing this job though? Yes, helping out people was all Izuku ever wanted to do. He always believed that he would need to become a pro hero to do it since what he does now would be considered illegal. But it wasn't in Sword Art Online. There were no laws or rules for helping others. He could do whatever he wanted. And helping other players was what he wanted to do. It always filled him with joy when he helped someone out. Quite often, he might run into one of his clients fighting where they said they'd never go, or help others with the new gear he obtained for them. It really felt like he was making a difference in this world. But all of that came crashing down on the 22nd of April. When Izuku checked his inbox after receiving a random notification. "Kirito has accepted your friend request." Kazuto Kurigaya didn't have the best life. Born with a weak quirk and his parents dying in a villain attack when he was a child wasn't really the best combination for a kid. For anyone, really. He grew up with his cousin, who treated him like a brother. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. The only downside was he was forced at a young age to do sports, which he hated. School was horrible, plain and simple. Everyone always wanted to brag about their quirks and how strong they were. And then there was Kurigaya sitting alone in the corner, too weak to do anything. Frankly, Kazuto was amazed at how he hadn't gone insane, but he could thank a hobby he found. One day when he was bored, he went searching in the attic since he'd never been up there. While looking around, he found an old handheld device with a video game on it. After charging the device in his bedroom and turning it on, he found himself lost within the pixels on the screen. By the time the console had died, 6 hours had passed. Video games were an escape from this reality. A way to go somewhere he was powerful and could protect himself and others. No one asked for his quirk and no one asked who he was most of the time. What started as a crappy little handheld soon turned into a console, then a computer. His games also changed as he played. From single-player adventure games to multiplayer MMO games. And thus Kirito was born. As the years progressed, Kazuto began to partition for early access to certain games. Occasionally he was successful, most of the time he wasn't. But his biggest score was when he was accepted to be a beta in Sword Art Online. A VR MMORPG that allowed players to truly be in the game. No controllers are being limited to a small space. The game scanned brain activity and carried that out in the real game. He was good at the game too, making it to the max floor of the beta test. But what really attached him to the game was the amount of power he had. To feel it coursing through his body. It wasn't something he held over others like they did him. It was more of a silent appreciation, knowing that here, he was strong. That's all that mattered to him. And then Sword Art Online had its full release and everything went to hell. While many others hated and feared what was happening, Kazuto embraced it wholeheartedly. He was stuck in a world where he wasn't limited in strength. Where he could grow strong. Stronger than most. As for the dying part, it didn't bother him. You only had one life in the real world, so this was honestly a really good outcome for him. But he did know that there were issues, while not many for him, he understood that many people trapped in this world would be distraught. Forced apart from their friends and families, and being subjected to a world with news laws and rules different from the ones they grew up with. He knew people were going to try and beat the game, and Kazuto was okay with that. He wasn't about to turn into a villain and prevent people from beating the game to survive. Then the first floor raid happened. Kazuto had been expecting it, although he imagined it would be sooner since all the beta testers knew where it was, but Kazuto chalked it up to everyone just wanting to level up first, not to mention beta testers weren't very popular among the players. Everyone who still went to the meetings met up in Tolbana, where one of the players, Diabel, told them that they found the first floor boss. Ilfang the Kobold Lord. Kazuto was ready. Ilfang wasn't a very challenging boss, being the first one. But it was more what he dropped that garnered his interest. The Code of Midnight. It wasn't anything special. The only added perk was boosting the hiding skill, but it was an armor set Kazuto had been wanting to get ever since he saw it in the beta test, and the only way to get it was to land the final blow on Ilfang until the 20th floor, and by that point there were better options. A tough goal, but it was something to work towards. Kazuto was slightly off-put when everyone was told to get into squads. He didn't have many social skills. Hell, the only person he could somewhat call a friend was Klein, and even then he left him on the first day. Looking around, he found everyone had already grouped up in teams of 6. Except for 2, who looked to be alone, so Kazuto approached them, hoping that they would let him join. And then he met a strange boy. Yamikumo. He was a higher level than Kazuto, used a katana of all things as a weapon, was a solo player who took on mercenary jobs for other people, and had never played a video game before. In any world, that player would be proud, boastful and rude. Exactly like the people he was used to in his school. Except Yamikumo wasn't. He was shy, soft-spoken and nervous. The exact opposite of what he expected. Later that night, he talked to the boy, alongside a girl who seemed to hold very little interest in the two of them. That was fine. Kazuto wasn't really there to talk to her. He wasn't able to get much out of Yamikumo. Except that he didn't know what a potion of aggression was. And for some ungodly reason, the boy had been collecting them. But he got enough with the mannerisms the boy gave off. Hiding away from crowds. Always wanting to stay on someone's good side. He was like him. Not completely, but just enough. Of course he didn't know what quirk the boy had, but he wasn't going to judge even if it was weak or villainous. The fight against Ilfang sucked at the start. The location had changed, which confused Kazuto. He had been put on the sidelines dealing with the grunts, and then Ilfang went into his second phase, just like the beta test. But Kazuto's blood froze when the boss pulled out a different weapon. Yamikumo realized this as well, having read the guidebook, and both of them tried to get Diabel out of there. Sadly, the man died. Afterwards, it was like a switch had been flipped in Yamikumo's mind. He almost turned into a different person. Gone was the nervous stammer and the social anxiousness. He was determined, commanding, and looking out for everyone in the fight. This wasn't the boy who was similar to him. This was a leader, a hero. The battle had been tough, but they managed to come out on top. Yamikumo had been the one to land the final hit, killing the boss and obtaining the Code of Midnight. Kazuto was upset, sure, but it wasn't the end of the world. He could just find another cool armor set. The only problem was that Yamikumo didn't get the Code of Midnight. Instead he'd received some armor called Hollow Guardian. That was the final nail in the coffin for Kazuto. Ilfang's new second phase, new potions, new drops, new locations and new mechanics. It was all different from what he was used to. He didn't feel powerful. He didn't feel in control. He felt scared. Everything from the beta test in Sword Art Online was ingrained into his brain. Every enemy he came across, his mind instantly told him everything it knew. But now that the game had changed, he would need to rewrite everything he knew about Sword Art Online. He couldn't trust a thing. After the fight, Yamikumo sent a friend request to him in Asuna. She accepted without hesitation, but Kazuto didn't accept it, nor did he reject it. He didn't want to outright reject the other kid, so he didn't touch the friend request, letting it rest in his requests. Shortly after, he found a guild who were having trouble with a horde of forest ogres. Kazuto, having fought these enemies multiple times in both the beta and full release, quickly came to their aid. After which, he learnt of their guild name, the Moonlit Black Cats. What started as him simply helping them out of a tight situation turned into him an acting bodyguard, which then turned into him becoming part of the guild. And for the first time in a very long time, Kazuto had friends. People who cared about him and vice versa. Now he had a reason to escape this game. He had people he wanted to truly meet and know in the real world. He finally had friends who didn't care about quirks or his strange habits. All of them were like him. Weak quirks and not popular in school, but the group of friends took that in stride, banding together and creating their own little group. So when Kazuto admitted his quirk was weak, they did not laugh at him, instead they sympathized and treated him as if he was a part of their group from the beginning. Although the member he was closest to was a girl named Saki. A shy girl who was afraid of this world. Afraid of dying. If they met at the start of Sword Art Online, Kazuto would have told her that it was just like real life and that it wasn't that big of a deal. But now, Kazuto agreed with her. The team noticed how close the two had become and teased the hell out of them both. And while yes, Saki was a nice girl, Kazuto didn't want to date anyone until he made it out of the game. For a while, everything was nice and peaceful. The guild went out, killed monsters, and shared a laugh over the dinner table. Then the 22nd of April happened. The leader, Keita, had gone to bargain for a house in the town of beginnings. Tetsuo, wanting to impress Keita, had suggested they go to the 27th floor and raid a dungeon for high-level loot. The other members, Sasamaru and Ducker, agreed with the idea, but Kazuto and Saki refused. They were a mid-level guild. The highest level dungeon they'd ever raided was level 20. This was way out of their league, but they countered, saying they'd grown much stronger with him around. Claiming that with him being level 23, it would be no problem. Now that was true, it would be difficult, but definitely possible for someone who was level 27 to raid a dungeon on that floor, but that wasn't the whole truth. Kazuto had been level 27, but that was back in January. Right now he was level 44. They didn't know he was a beta tester, and he was scared to tell them. The topic of beta testers had never been brought up, so he had no clue how they would react. It hurt to lie to his friends, but it had to be done. Before, Kazuto would have agreed to go to the dungeon with them. But he remembered Ilfang and Diabell. He knew it probably sounded heartless, but the man's death didn't really bother him all that much. He didn't know the man at all, so it wasn't like he lost someone important. But the Moonlit Black Cats did matter to him. He didn't want them to die because Kayaba decided to introduce something in a dungeon that would get them all killed. The group had their first argument with Kazuto. They wanted to go, and Kazuto wanted to stay put, or go raid a low or medium-level dungeon. But because he didn't want to explain why, his words didn't have much meaning. After a few minutes, he was given an ultimatum. Find someone within the hour to accompany them, or they would go without him. Kazuto was now in full-blown panic. While the guild wasn't weak by any means, he knew that if something went wrong in the dungeon, they wouldn't come back. He couldn't lose any of them, especially Saki. Opening his friends list, he felt the panic rise as he realized that because he didn't accept any friend requests, the only people in his friends list were the members of the Moonlit Black Cats. Except, there was one friend request which had been forgotten in his request page. The only request that he never accepted or denied. Yamikumo. Kazuto swallowed the saliva building up in his throat. Despite spending months with the Moonlit Black Cats, he still wasn't comfortable with befriending new people. But then he remembered how Yamikumo acted. He wasn't like many of the players he met. The boy was like him, but could turn into a leader when the situation arose. Exactly what they needed. Taking a deep breath, Kazuto accepted the friend request and then checked where the boy was. Yamikumo's current location. 27th floor, Ranbaru. The same level they were on, except in different towns. Knowing that Yamikumo probably got an alert to the friend request, Kazuto sent him a short message. Can we meet up? Izuku made his way to the inn, admiring the beauty of the town for the umpteenth time. Robaru was a beautiful place, giving a very fantasy look to it. Nights was especially beautiful. There was a reason many after-dark festivals were held here. Honestly, he wouldn't mind buying a house here, but that would only be for the view and the atmosphere. There weren't many important stores or locations in the town, so it wasn't really the best place to settle down. But admiring the town could wait. Right now he had a job to do. Walking into the inn, Izuku smiled when he recognized Kirito, sitting down at a table with 4 other people he didn't know. Perhaps they were his friends, or possibly even guildmates. Kirito looked up before waving him over. Hey Yamikumo. These are my guildmates. Tetsuo, Ducker, Sasamaru and Saki. He introduced Izuku to the gang. They all turned to look at him with slight shock. Whoa, Kirito, you never said you knew Yamikumo. Why you know me? Izuku asked, looking at all of them carefully, trying to remember if he'd done a job for them before. Well, you're also pretty well known. The mercenary who does jobs for free. You should expect a lot of people to know you, Ducker pointed out, his eyes drifting to the grinder on Izuku's elbow. That grinder basically gives you away, considering there isn't another one like that in the game. It's how people know you. Izuku opened his mouth to speak before shutting it. He was well known. No, that couldn't be right. They were probably messing around with him. So, Kirito said you guys needed my service. What do you want me to do? He asked, wanting to know what job he'd have to do. Bodyguard. Izuku's smile dropped into a look of uncertainty. He'd never been given this job before. Everyone always wanted him to either grab a rare weapon or some powerful material. And he made sure they knew he was inexperienced. I've, never done bodyguard work before, Izuku muttered shyly, not meeting their eyes. Hey man, it's fine. Think of it more as just helping us kill monsters we're having trouble with, Sasamaru said, leaning back with a smile on his face. So anyway, our leader is out buying a house right now. We wanted to raid a dungeon for loot to buy furniture, but Sourpuss over here, he pointed his thumb to Kirito, who didn't look amused. Says he wants to do a lower level dungeon. We refused and Kirito called you in for backup. He finished explaining why he was hired. Izuku frowned in thought. While he was nervous about doing bodyguard work, the other boy made a good point. He was just killing monsters like he always did. It shouldn't be too bad. What's the worst that could happen anyway? Nodding his head, he looked over to Kirito. Sure, I'll do it, the other boys cheered while Kirito shot him a grateful smile. When exactly do you plan to leave? Right now, Tetsuo stated, catching Izuku off guard with how sudden it was. Let's go. Kazuto clashed swords with one of the enemies they encountered. Looking over to the side, he could see Saki defending herself with her spear. Tetsuo and Sasamaru were dealing with a more powerful version of the enemy, but they seemed to be having no trouble with it. Yamikumo was running circles around an enemy, keeping its attention while Ducker was throwing poison-coated knives at it. Kazuto locked eyes with Yamikumo before was hit by one of the monsters, but since his pain setting was on the lowest setting, he didn't feel a thing. Quickly slashing his sword, he left a deep gash on its stomach, killing the creature. Once the enemies were dealt with, Yamikumo walked over to Ducker. How did you deal that much damage with the knives? He questioned. Deku, confused at the question, gave one of his own. Have you never used throwing knives before? I tried, but the damage wasn't good enough to justify it, Yamikumo confessed. Now I normally sell them for core, he admitted with a nervous laugh while shrugging his shoulders. You never tried lacing some of the knives with your potions? Wait, you can lace the knives with potions? Yamikumo asked with widened eyes, as if he was just told a game-breaking mechanic instead of just a thing many gamers knew. But while Yamikumo was an incredibly strong player, Kazuto also had to remind himself that this was also his first game. Even now, people are finding out new things every now and then. Not to mention it looked like he only stuck to his katana. Yeah, you didn't know? Deku questioned with a look of disbelief on his face. Shaking his head, he equipped a pack of 10 throwing knives before passing them over to the green-haired boy, who tried to deny the gift. Go on, take them. I carry like 100, I can go without 10 for this dungeon run. Yamikumo, seemingly defeated, accepted the gift with a smile and a promise to pay Deku back. Kazuto smiled at the interaction before Yamikumo turned to look at him. Hey, do you guys mind if I just borrow Kirito for a sec? Just want to ask him something. The other members of the guild nodded and walked ahead. We'll shout if we get into any trouble, Sasasaru said, but before they all left, Saki shot Kazuto a worried glance. Yeah, what's up Yamikumo? Kazuto questioned, unsure why the boy brought him aside to speak. Part of his mind thought the other player would try attacking him, but he waved that thought away. While Yamikumo might have been a higher level than him, Kazuto was sure he could take him, not to mention call for backup. Also the green-haired boy didn't seem like the type of person to do that. But the next words made Kazuto wish he had attacked him instead. You. Yamikumo paused before looking behind him, as if to check if anyone was nearby. You're a BT, aren't you? Kazuto froze in place, fear rushing through him. How? He'd been so careful to hide it. Sure, he almost slipped up early on a few times, but he'd gotten better at controlling what he said. The only other players who knew would be the people he met during the beta test. Yamikumo wasn't there. He shouldn't know this. How? When you got hit, the amount of health going down per hit from that enemy should be around this much. Yamikumo made a small gap between his index finger and his thumb. But yours is going down this much. He made the gap much smaller as he recalled what he saw. And the damage you're doing is much greater than what a level 27 player could do, even with your weapon. If I had to guess, I'd say you're a high level, between level 40 and 50. But you're lying to everyone, saying you're level 27. The only reason for you to lie is that you don't want to show others that you're better at the game than a normal person would be. Most players who are above level 40 right now are beta testers. So I just put the pieces together, Yamikumo finished, looking a bit nervous. Kazuto stared at Yamikumo. This guy watched him fight once, and suddenly knew what level he was. Who was this kid? The son of a detective or something? He sighed in defeat, which seemed to make Yamikumo panic. I won't tell them. I promise, Yamikumo was quick to add, waving his hands around frantically. I just wanted to know why hide your level from them. Kazuto huffed and looked down to where his friends had left. Beta testers aren't really well liked by a few people. And I don't know how they feel against beta testers. Then why don't they ask what they think? Yamikumo suggested, but Kazuto wasn't even going to consider doing that. How could I? What if I asked and they said they hated beta testers? What would I do then? He shouted before resting his back against the wall. I don't like lying to them, but these are the first friends I've ever made, and I don't want to lose them, he admitted how he felt. It was stupid, confessing his problems to someone he once teamed up with, but it still felt nice to get that all off his chest. I just don't know what to do. You care about them, don't you? Yamikumo asked, his voice sincere and gentle. He leaned up against the wall next to Kazuto. But building friendships off of lies, it may work now, but eventually when the truth is revealed, it won't be pretty. If they hate beta testers, then they'll get mad that you've been lying to them. And if they don't mind beta testers, they'll still get mad that you've been lying to them for all that time when they trusted you. Either way, you'll break their trust. Yamikumo turned to look at him. I know it's scary, but the truth always comes out. Kazuto hummed, taking Yamikumo's words into consideration. As much as he didn't want to admit it, the boy was right. The longer he kept this from them, the worse it would get. But that didn't help ease his worries. Because he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Tell them now, or wait and tell them later. Both weren't good options. As much as he liked to be cool and calm, he was forced to face the harsh truth. He was scared of losing his friends. Yamikumo watched him for a few moments and smiled softly. I want you to have this. If one of your friends dies, Yamikumo opened up his inventory before handing him a glowing stone. Raising an eyebrow, Kazuto took the stone and examined it. Divine Stone of Returning. Kazuto's eyes widened in shock at the stone he was holding. An item that could revive a player within 10 seconds of them dying. A literal way to cheat death itself. But why? He looked back up to Yamikumo, unsure why he would give this away so freely. I work alone. If I died, there would be no one around to revive me, and I don't normally work with others. This is my first time, and I don't know if I'll ever do it again. I think it would be better left with someone who wants to protect their teammates, and... Yamikumo paused for a few moments. And I guess it's because you're like me. Kazuto wasn't given much time to ponder what Yamikumo meant before the boy pushed himself off the wall. Right, let's go. Don't want to leave them waiting for too long. The group continued on through the dungeon, and to everyone's surprise, it wasn't that difficult. Izuku could see Kirito relax as they progressed deeper into the cold and desolate dungeon, but he still stayed on high alert. He'd let his guard down once, and that had nearly cost him his life. He was also lighting torches on the way, and when they got to a dead end, he snuffed out the torch closest to the turn while keeping all the other torches lit. Yamikumo. Sachi's quiet and timid voice called out to the boy, who turned to look at her. Why are you unlighting those torches? Izuku blinked a few times before turning back to the torch he just snuffed out. This place is like a maze. We could easily get lost here, so I'm marking the dead ends, he explained. Smart. Sasamaru nodded. Might need to start doing that, Tetsuo chuckled, storing that little tip for their future dungeon exploration trips. Ducker hummed in agreement before his head snapped to the side as he seemingly noticed something. Following his gaze, Izuku saw a faint symbol on the wall. Feeling curious, Ducker walked over to the wall and placed his hand on the symbol, and everyone watched as the wall faded away, revealing a secret room with a single treasure chest in the middle of it. Score. Ducker pumped his fist into the air as he, Sasamaru and Tetsuo walked into the room. Kirito and Saki entered the room as well, but with caution and hesitation on their faces. Lastly, Izuku walked in behind them, looking around the barren room. Once he stepped into the room, he felt all the hairs on his body stick up. It was silent. He couldn't hear anyone's footsteps, despite everyone walking around. Then he felt the chill of the room hit him. It felt like a freezer. Breathing out of his mouth, he could see his breath condense into fog which dissipated almost instantly. Ducker leaned down and opened the chest with a wide smile on his face, but the smile turned to confusion when instead of treasures inside the chest, he found nothing. What the? Tetsuo frowned, and then they heard an alarm blare out. Without hesitating, Izuku whipped out his katana, and that seemed to be the right call to make. Within seconds, the door that led them into the room closed, trapping the 6 players inside. Then another door opened, but Izuku wished it hadn't. Multiple small creatures with long white beards and pickaxes stormed into the room. And if that wasn't bad enough, 4 stone golems manifested in the room. What started out as an easy dungeon run turned into a nightmare as the 6 players were left to fight for their lives. Izuku swung his katana at one of the small dwarf-like creatures. His swings packed a punch, but he was level 50. Kirito would have stood a chance as well, but the others weren't going to survive. His observations turned true as he watched their health go down rapidly with every attack. Not even 5 seconds into the ambush and the underleveled players were always close to dying. He had to think of something, and fast. He couldn't take them all out within an instant, not even if he teamed up with Kirito, and he couldn't protect them all. He and Kirito could protect 2 at best, but that meant 2 others would die. There had to be a better way. And then it hit him. With no enemies attacking him, Izuku pulled out a potion with crimson-red liquid inside of it. A potion Kirito had said he should have thrown away long ago. Looking from the potion to the slaughter that was soon to commence, he took in a deep breath. Izuku didn't want to die. He wanted to live, to see his mother again, to become a hero. But if him dying meant that 5 innocent people could live, well, he could accept that. Kazuto was panicking. This wasn't how this dungeon run was supposed to go. He expected a few high-leveled enemies, which is why he hired Yamikumo, but this wasn't something he expected. Traps like these in dungeons weren't normally this bad. In the beta, it was just a small group of enemies, nothing like what was happening now. Kazuto knew that he and Yamikumo would be fine, but the others would be dead in a matter of seconds. He watched as Saki was overwhelmed by enemies before her health dropped so low that just one more attack would kill her. Saki! Kazuto shouted, trying to move forward through the enemies. He reached his hand out to grab her, to save her, but he knew deep down he would never reach her. But then he heard the sound of a potion being crushed. The golem's hand stopped just centimeters away from Saki. And it wasn't just that enemy. All of them had stopped moving, as if being fed new programming and trying to comprehend it. One by one, they all turned around to face the person in the corner of the room. Kazuto slowly looked over and the sight made his breath hitch. There, in the corner, stood Yamikumo with a fearful look, his body covered in a crimson aura. The same color as the potion of aggression. Oh no! In the blink of an eye, every single enemy in the room rushed towards the boy, who raised his sword in a defensive manner. A golem reached him first and swung at him. Yamikumo managed to block the hit, but a dwarf sliced his side. Hissing, the boy turned to attack the dwarf who sliced at him, but another golem punched him, causing him to fall off balance and onto the ground. Then the brutality commenced. Kazuto snapped out of it as fast as he could and ran towards Yamikumo. There was a large crowd of enemies, each basically pushing against each other, trying to get to Yamikumo to continue the assault. One of the dwarves swung its pickaxe at Yamikumo, and it slammed into his right eye. He cried out in agony as the creatures continued to attack him relentlessly. As Kazuto attacked, he watched Yamikumo's health go down. Since the green-haired boy was a very high-leveled player, it would take longer for the enemies to kill him. But with so many attacking him, his health was dropping fast. Kazuto rushed forward and slashed one of the dwarfs at the back, but it didn't even bother to turn around and look at him. It just kept struggling to get through the crowd to attack Yamikumo. But he didn't let that get to him, instead trying to kill as many of the enemies as possible to get to the boy. The rest of the moonlit black cats joined in, hoping to rescue the boy they'd hired to protect them. Even if they didn't do much damage, every single hit helped get to Yamikumo quicker. Yamikumo weakly tried to consume a health potion, but it was knocked out of his hands by one of the golems before another golem slammed its fist into his head, sending it cracking against the floor. The continuous assault from all sides got worse as the damage began to pile on. His right arm suffered a major blow, which ripped it from his body. His body was littered with multiple cuts and slashes. The moonlit black cats continued their assault, trying to reach the boy before his health faded away. Yamikumo's tortured screams acting as their fuel. Hacking and slashing through the enemies, Kazuto watched as Yamikumo's health dropped into the red and was getting lower and lower. Soon there was only one golem left, and they pushed their bodies into overdrive. They could get around the creature or risk taking a vicious blow meant for the target. Yamikumo's health got so low that there was only a sliver of health left. Yamikumo, hold on, we're coming, Kazuto shouted, trying to push his body beyond its limits to deal as much damage to the golem as possible. In front of the golem, all Yamikumo could manage was a weak smile directed to him. Yamikumo, Kazuto shouted, swinging his sword at the last golem for the final hit, but it was too late. The golem's fist collided with Yamikumo, sending his health to 0. The boy burst in particles as his character in Sword Art Online died. Kazuto's sword slammed against the golem, killing it and ending the terror that befell them all. They all stood still, looking at the spot where the Yamikumo died. Saki had tears in her eyes. The boys breathed heavily with horrified expressions. Kazuto's guilt skyrocketed. This was all his fault. He should have convinced the group not to go. Told them he was a beta tester and that dungeons could hold traps like this. And now the person he dragged along with them was dead. But then he remembered something. The stone. Kazuto quickly whipped out the gift Yamikumo gave him and quickly held it up. Revive Yamikumo. he shouted desperately. For a second, nothing happened. Kazuto immediately feared the worst. That the 10-second mark had passed, or the stone was a gag item. To his utter relief, the stone exploded into thousands of small particles, all floating around the room like small stars. They then began to zoom around the room before joining together in front of Kazuto. It began from the bottom up. First came the feet, then the legs, then the torso and arms, and finally the head. Kazuto watched as Yamikumo was put back together slowly until he was whole again. The group looked around at each other, not knowing if the boy was breathing, or if the stone did work. Thankfully, it did. Yamikumo's eyes shot open and he launched upwards, breathing erratically. His eyes darted all over the room with fear and trepidation. What happened? Where am I? He shouted, scooting away from everyone, like he was trying to escape from something. Yamikumo! Kazuto yelled, catching the boy's attention, who was still panicking. You're safe. It's okay. But I died. My HP went to 0. So how am I? Yamikumo trailed off as he started to figure out what happened. Looking up at Kazuto with his mouth slightly agape as he began to speak. Why did you use it on me? He asked, his eyes wide and his tone confused and scared. Use it if one of my friends die. Kazuto softly repeated what Yamikumo told him earlier as the doors to the room opened, letting them go. Izuku sat alone in a corner of the inn. The moonlit black cats dragged him back to, looking at his hands with a blank look on his face. The others sitting in a booth on the other side of the room, chatting. Although Izuku could see them constantly look over at him with concern in their eyes. It confused him. The concerned looks, why Kirito used the divine stone of returning on him. He he should have waited and used it if one of his guildmates died. Why did Kirito waste the stone on him? He was grateful, he really was, but he also didn't see why such a rare item was wasted on someone like him. And that made his mind travel to a dark place, with one thought circulating around his head. If he said he was quirkless, would Kirito have made the same decision? Sighing, Izuku looked up just as the door to the inn crashed open and a boy came running in, straight towards the moonlit black cats. Izuku instantly hopped off the stool he was sitting on in fear that this man was randomly going to attack them before he remembered that this was a no PvP zone. Instead he watched as the man ran over to the group and engulfed Tetsuo and Ducker, the two closest to him, in a large hug, which both boys immediately returned. Izuku relaxed, figuring this was probably the leader of the guild. They immediately began talking quietly, the group shooting him the same concerned glances as they'd been giving him for the past 10 minutes. The leader turned to look at him for a second before going back to the conversation. It was quiet, and being across the room didn't help, but Izuku could make out a few things. He saved us. Died. He okay? After a few more moments, the leader of the guild stood up and walked over to him. Izuku turned to face him, unsure of what was going to happen. The boy stood in front of Izuku, staring him in the eyes with an emotion Izuku had never seen someone give him before. Then he watched, shocked, as the boy got on his knees and bowed to him, touching his forehead to the floor. You protected them and sacrificed yourself. If not for you, my friends would all be dead, the boy spoke to him. Words can't describe how grateful I am to you, but I wanted to thank you, for everything you've done for them. Izuku choked on his words, trying to understand what was happening. But the guild's leader wasn't done just yet. If there is anything, and I mean anything, we can give or do for you, just tell me. Izuku held up his hands, still trying to make sense of the situation he found himself in. Don't worry, I don't need any payment. The loot I got from the dungeon is payment enough, besides, I don't believe in getting paid to help people. Izuku waved his hand as politely as he could, not wanting to seem rude. Are you sure? He asked, getting up off the floor. Izuku gave a small nod of confirmation. Well, why don't you come over, I'll buy you something to eat. This is non-negotiable. Oh, I'm Keita, by the way. Seeing the look in his eyes, Izuku slowly nodded and made his way over to the table where all the others were. Ducker scooted over, making room for him while Tetsuo did the same for Keita. There was an uncomfortable silence in the air. Everyone wanted to say something, but no one knew what they wanted to say. It stayed like this for a few moments before Kirito decided to ask the question they all wanted to know. Yamikumo, are you okay? Kirito asked, looking the boy in the eyes. Izuku blinked and looked down at the table. He wanted to cheerfully say he was fine and think that everything would be fine now, but after today, after dying, he didn't think he could manage that. His mind kept going back to when he crushed the potion. If he was given the chance to do it again, he would. Others were worth more than himself. That was something he was taught at a young age by all his teachers and peers. But after dying and coming back to life, it felt different. He still wanted to save people. But after what happened, it was almost sombering. To know that he had just grazed the point of no return. That if he hadn't given Kirito the divine stone of returning, he wouldn't be here. This world had put him in situations where he would have died if not for pure luck. And that knowledge terrified him. So that begged the question. When was his luck going to run out? I'm fine. Izuku lied with a more neutral tone than how he normally sounded. But thank you for asking. Kirito looked over at Izuku with a conflicted look, opening his mouth to say something before he shut it. Hey, Kirito, Sasamaru caught the black-haired boy's attention. During the, moment, his eyes subtly glanced in Izuku's direction. How were you doing that much damage? It was like twice what you normally do. Kirito's eyes widened in panic as he looked around the table, before looking at Izuku, who gave him a small, but encouraging nod. Taking in a deep breath, he spoke aloud. I'm a beta tester. Kirito blurted out to his guildmates, looking to the ground, not wanting to meet their gaze. I played the game when it was in beta. I'm not level 27. I'm level 44. I hid my skills because I was scared you guys would leave me, he admitted. The table was silent, everyone looking at each other in shock at the bombshell Kirito just dropped on them. Kirito, Keita spoke up finally, leaning over to place a hand on Kirito's shoulder. The boy flinched, expecting to be hit, but was shocked when the blow did not come. Looking up, he saw his guildmate look at him with a soft, but friendly expression. You could have told us earlier, we wouldn't have judged you at all. Why you guys don't hate me? Kirito asked, looking around the group, unsure if they were telling the truth or lying to him. Hate you? Why? Were you the one who put us in this game? Tetsuo asked a rhetorical question while taking a sip from his drink. Besides, pretty sure you didn't sign up for a death game knowing what would happen to us, Ducker added. I already knew, Saki whispered. Everyone's heads shot to her with surprise written on their faces, Kirito most of all. A couple weeks ago, when we slept in the same bed, I saw his level. I didn't understand why he hid it at first, but I started to figure it out as the time passed. Wait, you knew? Kirito questioned in disbelief, but there was also an ounce of happiness in his voice. And you didn't leave me. Why would I? Truth be told, I felt safe in your presence. And when I saw your level, I felt safer, since I knew you were strong enough to protect us, Saki said with a gentle smile on her face. Kirito could feel tears well up in his eyes. He quickly wiped them away before smiling. Thank you, he whispered softly. Hold on, did I hear that you and Saki slept in the same bed last night? Ducker jumped in with a grin. Freezing in place, Kirito turned to look at all his teammates with matching grins. Don't start, he warned the group with a blush on his face to match Sachi's, but the group wasn't going to let that go and began relentlessly teasing the pair. Izuku watched on with a smile at the group of good friends, ignoring the aching, hollow feeling in his heart. Izuku left the tavern. The warm and friendly environment turned into a cold and lonely one. Barely anyone was out on the streets, leaving him all alone in a quiet street. Izuku took in a deep breath through his nose before exhaling through his mouth. His breath turned to fog as it condensed in the night's air. He watched as the fog dissipated before his vision glitched out. After blinking, he found himself standing in the same trapped room with enemies approaching him. Quickly blinking, he found himself back outside the tavern. Feeling a tingle in both his arms, he held them up to his face and saw his hands shake rapidly. Izuku let out a shaky laugh and took another step forward before he hunched over, the phantom feeling of pain spreading throughout his body. He could feel the pickaxes pierce his stomach, stab into his eye, rip off his arm. He grasped at his arm, his body telling him it was still attached, but his mind said otherwise. Taking in deep gulps of air, he tried to regain his senses, but it was all too much for him. Oh God, it hurts, Izuku thought as he stumbled forward, gasping for air as he fell into an alleyway. He remained on his hands and knees. He retched, trying to throw up, but he just couldn't. His vision was shaking and all he could hear was the rapid thumping of his heart alongside a droning white noise. I don't want to be here, anyone. Please, Izuku pleaded in his mind, clawing at the ground, as if he could dig a hole out of this world and back into his. Please, someone, Mom, please help me, he begged as he crawled further into the alleyway before he lost all of his strength. And so he curled up into a fetal position, trying to muffle his tears as he broke down with no one around to help him. June 26, 2138. I'm sorry, I just need a minute, Izuku whispered, his hands shaking violently. Asuna found herself leaning into Izuku, gently holding his hands in hers as she leant against his shoulder. The detective leaned forward and turned off the voice recorder on the table. Please, take your time, he softly told the boy. It was probably good the boy's mother had left the room a while ago to leave them be, otherwise things could get messy and emotional real fast. But the detective shuddered, being so brutally murdered, then coming back to life. Most people probably would have lost their minds. Yet somehow, this kid pushed past it with no professional help. Yeah, that was going to have to change. Everyone who was in Sword Art Online was going to get a psychological evaluation, but anyone listening to this retelling of events would instantly know this kid needed help. And now that he was out of that world, help was what he was going to get. Izuku took a deep breath. Sorry, he apologized. It's fine. Just let me know if you need to stop, the detective said, leaning over and continuing the voice recorder. So, after that, what did you do? Izuku sighed and looked up to the ceiling, recalling what happened. Well, I was given a job by a man who had all his guildmates killed, and while doing the job, I met a new friend. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and please hype this video. Now we will see you in the next video.